Chapter 7. Friday, September 5th. When I get back to my desk, I'm looking for the Advil I usually keep on my desk when my cell phone rings. "Palmer here," I say, rummaging through my drawers.
"Hi, Bill. It's Stacy, Steve's assistant. I'm glad I caught you. There's a potential new board member in town named Eric Reed who needs to talk with all the IT executives. He's wondering if you're available for an hour right now."
"Hang on a sec while I pull up my calendar," I reply. The screen resolution on this old laptop is so low that the weekly view is unusable. I switch to the daily view, and the screen goes blank as the laptop chatters and whirs. I give up waiting and say earnestly, "Look, I know this is important, but can't this wait until Monday?" "You would not believe the day I'm having," she replies quickly.
"I wish it could wait, but he's only in town today. And from what I've seen, Bob Strauss, the new company chairman, and Steve are in a tizzy because they're worried that Eric may not accept our offer to join the board. He's apparently some technology hotshot, and Bob and Steve managed to get him in town to woo him. He insists on meeting the IT leadership team before he leaves."
"Okay, I'm in," I say, suppressing a sigh.
"Good. We have him set up in the conference room right by me. Come on over. There's a great coffee and donut spread here."
I laugh. "Well, that's the first good news I've had all day. I'm on my way." As I walk into the conference room in Building 2, I wave to Stacy, pondering the strange world I've been pulled into. I'm not used to being thrown into the middle of board politics. As promised, by the window is a large cart with 4 types of coffee and 6 boxes of Vandal donuts, a place in town so famous there's a long line at almost all hours of the day. A man in wrinkled khaki pants and an untucked denim button-down shirt is kneeling in front of the cart, unpacking the donuts onto 2 platters. I had no idea Vandal donuts delivered. I pick up a cup and start filling it with coffee, eyeing all the donuts. I say, "My wife and I are huge fans of you guys. Back when we were dating, almost every Friday night we'd wait in line for 20 minutes to get our fix. Now that we have kids, she just sends me out to get them for her. Maybe I'll take one home for her tonight." I grab a huge chocolate donut covered with Fruit Loops, as well as a giant frosted glazed donut with bacon on it, and 3 more that look tasty. The delivery man stands up and looks at me, smiling. "Yeah, I can see why. I'm really enjoying these donuts. Never had anything like them before. I've probably eaten 5 since I've been here. Not great for the low-carb diet I'm on, though." Holding out his hand, he says, "I'm Eric." Holy crap. I look down. In one hand, I have a cup of coffee, and in the other hand, I'm holding an overflowing plate. "Oh, geez," I say hurriedly. I put everything on the table behind me, turning around again to shake his hand. "Good to meet you. I'm Bill. Bill Palmer." I look him over again. He has a mustache, is around 6 feet tall, and a bit overweight, and has long graying hair that touches his shoulders. When standing, he looks even more like someone from a delivery company than a potential board member, let alone some technology hotshot. Taking another look at him, I correct myself. I'm pretty sure a delivery person would have less wrinkled clothes. "No worries," he says cheerily, grabbing another donut from the tray and gesturing toward the table. "Have a seat. I was hoping to talk with each of the IT leaders while I was in town. Of course, I had to talk with Steve and, what's your CFO's name? Darren? Dale? Whatever. They seemed like nice enough fellows. Maybe a little blind, but..." He gestures dismissively. "I talked with your development guy too, Carrie. Calvin? And I'll be talking with your security guy next, Jimmy. And your retailing person, Sylvia." I try to hide my pained expression as he's managed to mangle everyone's name. "I see. And what have your impressions been so far?" I ask carefully. He stops chewing and brushes some crumbs off his mustache, pausing to think. "It looks like you're in a world of hurt. IT operations seem to have lodged itself in every major flow of work, including the top company project. It has all the executives hopping mad, and they're turning the screws on your development guy to do whatever it takes to get it into production. He looks me in the eye. You're having chronic IT availability issues, causing company executives to be splashed on the front page news. And now audit is hot on your tail, meaning more possible front page news, and maybe even an adverse footnote on the quarterly financial statement. And anyone who knows anything about Phoenix knows that there's a lot more bad news to come on that front. As he's talking, I feel my face flush red. Whether in anger or embarrassment, I'm not sure. Things don't look so good for you, pal, he says. At least not to a prospective board member, who's supposed to oversee and assess your performance. I purse my lips, resisting the urge to say something that sounds defensive. I say neutrally, Steve asked me to take this job 3 days ago. Even though I kept saying no, he eventually convinced me to accept the position. There've sure been a lot of surprises. He looks at me for a moment, and then guffaws. Yeah, I'll bet, he says disarmingly. Ha ha! Surprises. So, what's your game plan for righting the ship? I look up for a moment, trying to figure out how to describe the few corrective actions I've put in place after this week. I reply, honestly, I'm still trying to get some situational awareness. Mostly I'm being whiplashed from one emergency to another. I do know that we need more rigor and discipline in how we work. I'm trying to figure out what processes we rely on to get work done around here. Based on what I've seen, I know we need to improve them so we stop shooting ourselves in the foot. I think for a moment. That's just to get us out of firefighting mode. I'm still trying to figure out how to resource an audit remediation project that just fell out of the sky. Based on what I've seen, we're seriously behind on our commitments. We're obviously going to need more people, or get a lot more efficient to get all our committed work done. Eric frowns. Rigor and discipline, huh? I'm guessing you were a non-commissioned officer in the military. An E6. No, you're too young. An E5, right? I blink in surprise. That's right. E5. U.S. Marine Corps. How did you know? Lucky guess, he says glibly. For one thing, you sure don't look like a chemical engineer or an auditor. What? I ask. You're right that you can't achieve the strategic until you've mastered the tactical, he says, ignoring my question. But what worked for you in the Marines will never work here, considering how they run this circus. Instead of one general in your chain of command, you've got 10 generals calling the shots here, and all of them have a direct line to each and every private in your company. I say slowly, wait, you're saying rigor and discipline don't matter? Of course they matter, he says sternly. But you have a much bigger problem, and it has nothing to do with your argle-bargle of efficiencies and process. Your problem right now is that you obviously don't actually know what work is. I stare at him. Who is this buffoon? For a moment, I wonder whether I can assign Wes or Patty to deal with this guy, but Steve obviously wanted me to handle this personally. I know what work is, I say slowly. We do it every day. If we can't keep the lights on and finish the work that the business requires, I'm out of a job. What, then, exactly, is your definition of work? He asks, with a genuinely curious expression on his face. Well, I can tell you that Steve has stated over and over to me in no uncertain terms that we need to get Phoenix out the door. That qualifies as work in my mind. He looks up, appearing to have a conversation with himself. Yes, that's certainly one type of work. But you're still missing the 3 other types of work that IT operations is responsible for. To me, that's nowhere near the level of understanding of work you need in order to fix your problems around project deliverables, outages, and compliance. He stands up. Grab your stuff, we're going for a ride. Confused and annoyed, I look at my watch. It's 4:17 p.m. I have too much to do to waste much more time with this guy. Then he's gone. I look out in the hallway, but he's not there either. I look at Stacy questioningly, and she points toward the elevators. I run to catch up with him. He's walked into an elevator that just opened. When he turns around, he holds the door open for me. You probably don't even see when work is committed to your organization. And if you can't see it, you can't manage it, let alone organize it, sequence it, and have any assurance that your resources can complete it. I frown, recalling my last meeting with Wes and Patty when they struggled to come up with the list of all our commitments to the organization. I say, "What is this? Some kind of intelligence test?" "Yes, you could say that," he replies. "But don't worry. It's not just you. Steve has to pass his intelligence test too, and for that matter, Dick as well." I follow him to his blue subcompact rental car, and we drive 5 minutes to MRP8, one of our manufacturing plants. It's enormous, probably 4 times bigger than my building. But this one is in immaculate condition, with some obvious recent renovations and add-ons. A security guard in her late 50s greets us. "Good afternoon, Dr. Reed. How nice to see you. How are you doing? It's been a long time." Eric shakes her hand warmly, replying with a wink. "Great seeing you again, Dorothy. We're just here to get a bird's-eye view of the plant floor. Can we still get on the catwalk?" She replies with a flirtatious smile. "It's closed to most people, but for you, I think we can make an exception." I look at Eric suspiciously. He supposedly couldn't get anyone's name right, and yet he apparently remembers the name of some security guard from years past. And no one ever mentioned anything about a Dr. Reed. After climbing 5 flights of stairs, we're standing on a catwalk that overlooks the entire plant floor, looking like it goes on for at least 2 city blocks in every direction. "Look down there," he says. "You can see loading docks on each side of the building. Raw materials are brought in on this side, and the finished goods leave out the other. Orders come off that printer down there. If you stand here long enough, you can actually see all the WIP, that's work in process or inventory for plant newbies, make its way toward the other side of the plant floor, where it's shipped to customers as finished goods. For decades at this plant," he continues, "there were piles of inventory everywhere. In many places, it was piled as high as you could stack them using those big forklifts over there. On some days, you couldn't even see the other side of the building. In hindsight, we now know that WIP is one of the root causes for chronic due date problems, quality issues, and expediters having to rejuggle priorities every day. It's amazing that this business didn't go under as a result." He gestures broadly with both arms outstretched. "In the 1980s, this plant was the beneficiary of 3 incredible scientifically grounded management movements. You've probably heard of them. The theory of constraints, lean production, or the Toyota production system, and total quality management. Although each movement started in different places, they all agree on one thing. WIP is the silent killer. Therefore, one of the most critical mechanisms in the management of any plant is job and materials release. Without it, you can't control WIP." He points at a desk near the loading docks closest to us. "See that desk over there?" I nod, but also look pointedly at my watch, 4:45 p.m. Oblivious to my impatience, he says, "Let me tell you a story. Decades ago, there used to be a guy named Mark. He was the supervisor for that first work center, right down there by that desk. Those racks hold the folders for incoming jobs. Isn't it amazing that those folders look exactly like they did back then? At any rate," he continues, "one day I see Mark picking up a folder to start some job. I ask him, 'On what basis did you choose that job versus any of the others?' And do you know what he tells me? He says, 'It's a job that requires this work center first, and we're open.'" He shakes his head incredulously. I could hardly believe it. I tell him, "Your station is just the first of 20 operations. You don't factor the availability of any of the other 19 stations in your decision?" And he replies, "Well, no. This is the way I've done it for 20 years. He laughs. I suppose to him, It sounds like a reasonable way to pick which job to perform. He's keeping the first station busy, and it's similar to first in, first out scheduling. But of course, now everyone knows that you don't release work based on the availability of the first station. Instead, it should be based on the tempo of how quickly the bottleneck resource can consume the work. I just stare at him blankly. He continues, "Because of how Mark was releasing work, inventory kept piling up in front of our bottleneck, and jobs were never finished on time. Every day was an emergency. For years, we were awarded Best Customer of the Year from our air freight shipment company because we were overnighting thousands of pounds of finished goods to angry customers almost every week." He pauses and then says emphatically, "Eliyahu M. Goldratt, who created the theory of constraints, showed us how any improvements made anywhere besides the bottleneck are an illusion. Astonishing, but true. Any improvement made after the bottleneck is useless because it will always remain starved, waiting for work from the bottleneck. And any improvements made before the bottleneck merely results in more inventory piling up at the bottleneck." He continues, "In our case, our bottleneck was a heat treat oven, just like in Goldratt's novel, The Goal. We also had paint curing booths that later became constraints too. By the time we froze the release of all new jobs, you couldn't even see the bottleneck work centers because they were surrounded by huge piles of inventory, even from up here." Despite myself, I laugh with him. It's obvious in hindsight, but I can imagine that to Mark, it was anything but obvious. "Look, thanks for the history lesson, but I learned most of this already in business school. I don't see how this could possibly be relevant to managing IT operations. IT is not like running a factory." "Oh, really?" He turns to me, frowning intensely. "Let me guess. You're going to say that IT is pure knowledge work, and so therefore all your work is like that of an artisan. Therefore, there's no place for standardization, documented work procedures, and all that highfalutin rigor and discipline that you claim to hold so near and dear." I frown. I can't figure out if he's trying to convince me of something I already believe, or trying to get me to accept an absurd conclusion. "If you think IT operations has nothing to learn from plant operations, you're wrong. Dead wrong," he says. "Your job as VP of IT operations is to ensure the fast, predictable, and uninterrupted flow of planned work that delivers value to the business while minimizing the impact and disruption of unplanned work, so you can provide stable, predictable, and secure IT service." Listening to him, I wonder if I should be writing this down. He studies me closely. "Well, I can see that we're not ready to have this discussion. Until you gain a better understanding of what work is, any conversation we have about controlling work will be totally lost on you. It would be like talking about acrobatics to someone who doesn't believe in gravity yet." "Rest assured, though," he says, pointing at the job release desk, "in order to get to where you want to go, eventually you will need to figure out what your equivalent to that desk is. You must figure out how to control the release of work into IT operations and, more importantly, ensure that your most constrained resources are doing only the work that serves the goal of the entire system, not just one silo. Once you figure this out, young Bill, you will be well on your way toward understanding the 3 ways," he says. "The first way helps us understand how to create fast flow of work as it moves from development into IT operations, because that's what's between the business and the customer. The second way shows us how to shorten and amplify feedback loops, so we can fix quality issues at the source and avoid rework. And the third way shows us how to create a culture that simultaneously fosters experimentation, learning from failure, and understanding that repetition and practice are the prerequisites to mastery." Although he now sounds oddly like Master Shifu in the movie Kung Fu Panda, I'm listening intently. The need for rigor and discipline, and constantly practicing and honoring our skills are important lessons I've kept with me from the Marines. The lives of my men depended upon it there, and my job depends upon it here. Creating that predictability is what I'm most intent on instilling in my IT operations group. Eric hands me a slip of paper with a phone number on it. Remember, there are 4 types of work. You've named business project work as one. When you have the other 3, give me a call. He takes out his car keys from his pocket and asks, "Do you want a lift back to your office?" It's 5:10 p.m. when I finally get back to my cubicle. I log back into my clunker laptop to reply to emails, but I can't concentrate. The last hour with Eric was like being in a strange parallel universe, or like being forced to watch a psychedelic movie made in a drug-induced haze. What did Eric mean that there were 4 categories of work? I think back to my meeting with Wes and Patty. Wes mentioned we have a separate list for IT infrastructure projects and business projects. Are infrastructure projects another type of work? As I ponder this, an email notification window pops up on my screen, indicating another email expecting a response. Are emails another type of work? I doubt it. At the plant, Eric gestured to the entire plant floor. When he mentioned work, he seemed to mean it at an organizational level, not at the level of an individual contributor or manager. I think about it some more. Then I shake my head and quickly email Steve, letting them know that I connected with Eric. I'm certain that a decade from now I'll be telling my friends about my brief encounter with the raving madman on the manufacturing plant floor. I need to get moving. Paige will be seriously annoyed if I come home late on a Friday night. When I undock the laptop from the docking station, an incredibly loud alarm pierces the air. "Holy crap!" I shout, realizing that the sound is coming from my laptop. Fumbling, I try to turn down the volume, to power it off, but nothing makes the sound stop. Frantically, I flip the laptop over and try to take the battery out, but the tape keeps it attached. I grab a letter opener, finally managing to slash the tape and get the battery out. The laptop finally goes silent. Chapter 8. Monday, September 8th. I spent all weekend working on a PowerPoint slide deck for my meeting with Steve this morning. Despite all that work, I wish I could have done more to prepare. I force myself to relax, visualizing having a healthy and vigorous business discussion with him, walking out with everything I ask for. I keep reminding myself how important this is for the company and my organization. Everyone worked so hard to prepare for this, and now success or failure depends on how well I can communicate it all to Steve. Stacy smiles when I arrive and says warmly, "Go on in. I'm sorry we could only get you 30 minutes. I stop just inside the door, where Sarah is sitting with Steve at the table. Sarah is telling Steve, "You did an amazing job telling the story of where we're going. These were some of the most skeptical analysts around, but they clearly got excited. You've also given them a reason for us to talk again when Phoenix goes live. They also seem pretty impressed with the Phoenix roadmap." They're telling analysts about the Phoenix roadmap? With so many features being delayed to the next release, I question the wisdom of making insufficiently informed promises to the market. Steve just nods and replies happily, "Let's see if it changes their impressions of us. Good job scheduling the call. Catch you later today for the next one." Sarah gives me a smile and says, "Hey, Bill, you're up and at it early today, aren't you?" Gritting my teeth, I just ignore her comment. "Good morning, everyone." Trying to show an interest, I say, "Sounds like you had a good call." Sarah smiles even more broadly. "Yes, they're really excited about our vision and agree that it's going to be a real game changer for us. This is what we need to change how we're perceived by the broader market and Wall Street." I look levelly at her, wondering whether these briefings that we give the outside world might be what is causing such pressure on Chris's team to release features so prematurely. I grab a seat across from Steve. I can't quite turn my back on Sarah, but I do my best. I don't want to give Steve my handouts until Sarah has left the room, but she continues to talk with Steve, recounting their meeting and how to change the talk track for the next analyst call. As they talk, all I can think of is how she's eating into my time with Steve. 11 minutes later, Steve laughs at a joke from Sarah, and she finally leaves the office, closing the door behind her. Steve turns to me and says, "Sorry about going over. Our next Phoenix analyst briefing is in 20 minutes. So what's on your mind?" "You've impressed upon me from the very beginning that I need to help maximize the profitability of success of the Phoenix rollout," I start. "Based on my observations of the past week, we are stretched dangerously thin, to the point that I believe Phoenix is in considerable jeopardy. I've had my staff establish what our levels of demand and capacity truly are," I continue. "We've started to inventory everything we're being asked to do, regardless of how big or small. Based on the analysis so far, it's clear to me that the demand for IT work far exceeds our ability to deliver. I've asked them to make more visible what the pipeline of work looks like, so we can make more informed decisions about who should be working on what and when." With as much gravitas as I can muster, I say, "One thing is very clear, though. We are definitely understaffed. There's no way that we can deliver everything we've promised. Either we've got to cut down the project list, or we've got to staff up." Trying to replicate the reasoned and logical argument I've spent all weekend rehearsing, I continue. "The other big problem is that we have too many different projects competing for our attention. You've been consistent and clear that Phoenix is the most important, but we can't seem to keep resources dedicated to it. For instance, last Thursday, Internal Audit delivered to us a set of findings that we must investigate and assemble a response letter for in 1 week. Doing so will impact Phoenix." I've been watching Steve as I talked, and so far he's remained expressionless. I look at him calmly and say, "What I'd like to get out of our meeting is an understanding of the relative priority of Phoenix versus the audit findings, and to talk about the number of projects and how to adequately staff them. In my mind, I've done a good job of being the competent and passionate manager who is dispassionately struggling to decide how to best serve the business, without making moral judgments." Steve replies in an exasperated voice, "What kind of bullshit prioritization question is this? If I went to my board and told them that I need to do either sales or marketing, and asked them which of those I should do, I'd be laughed out of the room. I need to do both, just like you need to do both. Life is tough. Phoenix is the top company priority, but that doesn't mean you get to hold the SOX 404 audit hostage." I count to 3 before saying, "Obviously, I'm not being clear. Both Phoenix and the Compliance Project share certain key resources, such as Brent. The Compliance Project alone would tie up these people for a year. But we need them focused on Phoenix. On top of that, our infrastructure is so fragile that we have daily failures, which often require these same resources to restore normal operations. If a similar outage to the payroll run failure happened today, we'd likely have to pull Brent off both the Phoenix and compliance work to figure out what went wrong." I look at him dead on and say, "We've looked at different resourcing options, including hiring and moving people around, but none of them will have any effect fast enough to make a difference. If Phoenix is really the top priority, we need to put some of the compliance work on hold." "Out of the question," he says before I can even finish. "I've seen that big pile of audit findings, and we will be in very hot water if we don't get those issues fixed." This is definitely not going according to plan. "Okay," I say slowly. "We'll do our best, but let me state for the record that we're too understaffed to do a good job on either one, let alone both." I wait for him to acknowledge my point. Seconds go by before he finally nods. Realizing this is probably the best I'm going to get, I indicate to the first page of the handout I gave to him. I say, "Let's zoom up and talk about project demand and capacity. We're currently supporting over 35 business projects through Kirsten's project management office, and at current count, 70+ other smaller business projects and internal initiatives. And there are others out there that we just haven't counted yet. With our 143 IT operations people, nothing is getting done as promised." I point him to the second page of the handout, saying, "As you can see, my team and I have come up with a request for 6 additional resources that we're most short-handed on." I go for the close, saying, My goal is to increase our throughput so we won't be in this position again, and to get as many of these projects done as we can. I'd like your approval to get these openings immediately so we can start our search. Talent like Brent is not easy to find, and we need to start sooner rather than later. In my rehearsals, this is when Steve would run his finger down the figures, ask me some questions, and we'd have a meaningful discussion about how to make the best trade-offs. Maybe he'd even pat me on the back and compliment me on the quality of my analysis. But Steve doesn't even pick up my handouts. Instead, he looks at me and says, "Bill, Phoenix is already $10 million over budget, and we must get cash flow positive soon. You have some of the most expensive resources in the entire company. You have to use what you've got." He crosses his arms and continues. "Last year, we had some IT analysts come in and benchmark our company against our peers. They told us that we're spending way more on IT than our competitors. You may think that with 3,000 employees, 6 more employees won't make a difference, but trust me, every expense is under scrutiny. If I can't close the profitability gap, I'll have to do another layoff. Your math of adding another $2 million in labor costs just doesn't work." He continues in a more sympathetic voice. "My suggestion to you, go to your peers and make your case to them. If your case is really valid, they should be willing to transfer some of their budget to you. But let me be clear, any budget increases are out of the question. If anything, we may have to cut some heads in your area." I spent hours role-playing worst-case scenarios over the weekend. Apparently, I'm going to have to practice being more pessimistic. "Steve, I don't know how I can be more clear about this," I say, feeling a little desperate. "This stuff isn't magic. All this work being piled on us is done by real people. Commitments like the compliance work are made without any regard for what's already on people's plates, like Phoenix." Realizing I have little to lose, but trying to shock some sense into him, I say, "If you really care about closing the gap with the competition by having Phoenix succeed, you sure aren't acting like it. To me, it seems like you're just being suckered to rush to the gunfight late, showing up with only a knife." I expected some kind of reaction, but he merely leans back, crossing his arms in front. "We're all doing our best, so you better go back and do the same." Just then, the door opens as Sarah walks in. "Hi, Steve. Sorry to interrupt, but we have the next analyst call in 2 minutes. Shall I dial us in?" Shit. I look down at my watch. 9:27. She even robbed me of my last 3 minutes. Utterly defeated, I finally say, "Okay, got it. Keep pushing. I'll keep you posted." Steve nods in thanks, and then turns to Sarah as I close the door behind me. On my way out, I toss the presentation I had worked on all weekend into Stacy's recycling bin. I try to wave away the stench of failure as I walk to the cab meeting. I'm still thinking about how I'm going to break the bad news to Wes and Patty when I walk into the conference room that Patty has coined the Change Coordination Room. All thoughts of Steve disappear when I see what's there. Almost every area of the wall is now covered in whiteboards. Index cards cover nearly every inch of the whiteboards on 2 of the walls. It's not just 1 deep. In some places there are hooks attached to the board, with 10 cards hanging off them. On the conference room table are 20, maybe even 30 more piles of cards. On the far side of the table, 2 guys who work for Patty have their backs to us, studying a card. After a moment, they tape it between 2 other cards in front of them. "Holy crap," I say. "We've got a problem," Patty says from behind me. "Not enough space for more whiteboards?" I say, only half joking. Before Patty answers, I hear Wes enter the room. "Holy shit," he says. "Where did all these cards come from? Are they all for this week?" I turn to ask him, "Are you surprised? Most of these are coming from your group." He looks around at all the boards and then at the cards on the table. "I knew that my guys were really busy, but there must be a couple of 100 changes here." Patty turns her laptop around to show us the spreadsheet she has open. "Since last Friday, there have been 437 changes submitted for this week." Wes, for once, is speechless. He finally shakes his head and says,
And now we're supposed to go through and approve all of them? This meeting was only scheduled for an hour. We'd need days to go through all of these. He looks at me. Mind you, I'm not saying that we shouldn't. But if we're going to do this every week... Again, Wes stops speaking, overwhelmed at the task in front of us. Quite honestly, I feel the same way. Apparently, getting all the managers to submit their changes for the week was just the first step. I didn't expect that the process would fall apart as we went beyond collecting the data and actually set out to process and authorize the changes. I forced myself to say cheerfully, "This is a great start. Like most things, things will get worse before they get better. We've got enthusiastic support from the technical managers, so now we've got to figure out how to get these changes scrutinized and scheduled on an ongoing basis. Any ideas?" Patty is first to speak up. Well, no one says that we have to be the ones reviewing all the changes. Maybe we can push down some of these to delegates. I listen to Wes and Patty trade ideas back and forth before I say, let's go back to our goals. Get the left and right hands to know what the other is doing. Give us some situational awareness during outages, and give audit some evidence that we're addressing change control. We need to focus on the riskiest changes, I continue. The 80-20 rule likely applies here. 20% of the changes pose 80% of the risk. I stare again at the piles of cards in front of us and pick up a couple at random, searching for some inspiration. Holding up a card that has a big frowny face drawn on it, I ask, "What's Pucker?" "That worthless app," Wes says with disgust, "is the Parts Unlimited check clearing and reconciliation application that someone implemented almost 2 decades ago. We call it Pucker because every time we change it, it blows up, and no one knows how to fix it. The vendor went out of business during the dot-com boom, but we've never gotten funding to replace it." I ask, "If we know it's that prone to crashing, why do we need to change it?" Wes says quickly, "We try not to, but sometimes the business rules change, and we also have to keep it patched. It's running an operating system that's out of maintenance, so it's always dicey." Good. It's a risky change. What other types of changes are being submitted like Pucker? We make a pile of nearly 50 cards proposing changes to the Rainbow, Saturn, and Taser applications, and also changes to the network and certain shared databases, which could impact a significant portion or even all of the business. "Even looking at those cards makes my heart palpitate," Wes says. "These are some of the dangerous changes we make around here." He's right. I say, "Okay, let's mark all of these as fragile. These are high risk and must be authorized by the CAB. Patty, changes like this should be at the top of the pile during our meetings." Patty nods, taking notes, saying, "Got it. We're predefining high-risk categories of change that not only must have change requests submitted, but must have authorization before being scheduled and implemented." We quickly create a list of the top 10 most fragile services, applications, and infrastructure. Any change requests that could affect any of these will be immediately flagged for CAB scrutiny. Patty adds, "We need to create some standard procedures around these changes, like when we'll want them implemented, and have key resources not only aware of them but also standing by, just in case things go wrong. Even the vendors." She adds with a half smile, "You know, like having firefighters and ambulances lined up on the runway, ready to spray safety foam when the airplane lands in flames." Wes laughs and adds wryly, "Yeah, in the case of Pucker, have the coroner stock up on a bunch of body bags too, and a PR person ready to handle the angry phone calls from the business saying that some customers were allergic to the foam we used." I laugh. "You know, that's an interesting idea. Let's let the business choose the foam. There's no reason why all the responsibility should rest on our shoulders. We can send an email out to the business ahead of time and ask when the best implementation time would be. If we can give them data on the outcomes of previous changes, they may even withdraw the change." Patty is typing away. "Got it. For these types of changes, I'll have my staff generate some reports on the changes' success rates and any associated downtime. This will help the business make more informed decisions around the changes." I'm extremely pleased with Patty's idea and am confident that we're on the right track.
Okay, that still leaves 400 cards to go. Any ideas? Wes has been going through the cards methodically, creating 2 big stacks of cards next to him. He picks a card from the bigger pile. This pile has changes we do all the time, like this one about the monthly tax table upload to the POS system. I don't think we should suspend any of these changes. On the other hand, these changes are stuff like increasing the Java application server thread pool size, installing the Kumquat vendor application hotfix to resolve performance issue, and resetting the Kentucky data center load balancer to default duplex settings. What the hell do I know about these things? Wes says. I just don't know enough about the context to have an actual opinion. I don't want to be like a seagull, flying in, crapping on people, and then flying away, you know? Excited, Patty says, Excellent. The first ones are the low-risk changes that ITIL calls standard changes. For changes we've done many times before successfully, we just pre-approve. They still need to be submitted, but they can be scheduled without us. When everyone nods, she continues, That leaves about 200 changes that are medium-risk changes that we still need to look at. I agree with Wes, I respond. For these, we need to trust that the manager knows what he or she is doing. But I'd like Patty to verify that people have appropriately informed anyone they could affect and gotten the okay to proceed from all of them. I think for a moment and say, Take John's tokenization application. Before that change request would even come to us, I would expect him to get the nod from the application and database owners, and also the business. If he's done that, that's good enough for me. I view our role as making sure that he's dotted the I's and crossed the T's. At this level, I care more about the integrity of the process, not so much about the actual changes. Patty is typing away. Let me see if I've got this right. For the messy middle changes, we're deciding that the change submitter has responsibility and accountability for consulting and getting approval from people potentially affected. Once they do that, they submit their change card for us to review and approve for scheduling. I smile and say, Yep. Work for you, Wes? At last, he says, I think it'll work. Let's give it a shot. Good, I say. Then I say to Patty, You can help make sure the change requesters are actually doing all the work beforehand? Patty smiles and says, With pleasure. She looks up at the board, tapping a pen on the table while she thinks. She says, Today is Monday. We've already said today's changes are cleared for implementation. I propose we extend the amnesty period through tomorrow and assemble a full CAB meeting for Wednesday with the intent of scheduling the rest of the changes. That should give everyone enough time to prepare. I look at Wes. He says, This is good, but I'm already thinking about next week. We should tell everyone to keep the change requests coming in, and let's set up the weekly CAB meetings starting Friday the 19th. Patty looks as pleased as I am that Wes is planning ahead to the following week, instead of griping. She says, I'll have instructions sent to everyone in the next couple of hours. After she finishes typing, she adds, One last thing. I just want to point out that we're tying up 2 people, as well as myself, running this manual process. It's very labor-intensive. Eventually, we're going to have to think about some way to automate this. I nod. No doubt that this isn't sustainable in its current form. But let's get a couple of CAB meetings under our belt and nail down what exactly the rules are. I promise you that we'll revisit this. The meeting winds down, and we all leave smiling. That's a first for my team. Chapter 9. Tuesday, September 9th. I'm in the most ruthless budget meeting I've ever attended. Dick sits in the back of the room, listening attentively and occasionally officiating. We all defer to him, as he'll create the first cut of the annual plan. Sarah sits next to him, tapping away on her iPhone. I finally pick up the phone. It must be a genuine emergency. It's been vibrating almost non-stop for the past minute. I read, Sev 1 incident. Credit card processing systems down. All stores impacted. Holy crap. I know I've got to leave this meeting, despite knowing that everyone will try to steal my budget. I stand up, struggling with the large laptop, trying to keep more pieces from falling off.
I almost make it out when Sarah says, "Another problem, Bill?" I grimace. Nothing we can't handle. In reality, any Sev1 outage automatically qualifies as a very big problem, but I don't want to give her any ammunition. When I get to the knock, I grab the seat next to Patty, who is coordinating the call. "Everyone, Bill just joined us. To catch you up, we have confirmed that the order entry systems are down, and we have declared a Sev1 incident. We were just trying to establish what changed." She pauses, looking at me. "And I'm not confident we actually know." I prompt everyone. Patty asked a pretty simple question. "So, what were all the changes made today that could have led to this outage?" There is an awkward silence that stretches on as people either look down or look around at one another suspiciously. Everyone is avoiding eye contact. I'm about to say something when I hear, "This is Chris. I told Patty this before, and I'm telling you again now. None of my developers changed anything. So cross us off your hit list. It was probably a database change." Someone at the end of the table says angrily, "What? We didn't make any changes. Well, not on anything that could have impacted the order entry systems. Are you sure it wasn't an operating system patch gone wrong again?" Someone 2 seats over then sits up and says heatedly, "Absolutely not. We don't have any updates scheduled to hit those systems for another 3 weeks. I'd bet $50 it was a networking change. Their changes are always causing problems." Slapping both hands over his eyes, Wes shouts, "For crying out loud, guys!" Looking exasperated and resigned, he says to someone across the table, "You need to defend your honor too. Everyone might as well have a turn." Sure enough, the networking lead across the table from him holds up both hands, looking hurt and aggrieved. "You know, it really isn't fair that networking keeps getting blamed for outages. We didn't have any changes scheduled for today." "Prove it," the database manager challenges. The networking lead turns bright red, his voice cracking. "This is bullshit. You're asking me to prove that we didn't do anything. How the hell do you prove a negative? Besides, I'm guessing the problem is a bad firewall change. Most of the outages in the last couple of weeks were caused by one of them." I know I should probably put an end to this madness. Instead, I force myself to lean back in my chair and keep observing, one hand covering my mouth to hide my angry scowl and to keep me from saying something rash. Patty looks exasperated and turns to me. "No one from John's team is present on the call. His team handles all the firewall changes. Let me try getting a hold of him." I hear the sounds of loud tapping on a keyboard from the speakerphone, and then a voice says, Can someone try it now?" There are sounds of multiple people typing on laptop keyboards as they try to access the order entry systems. "Hold it," I say loudly, jumping halfway out of my chair, pointing at the speakerphone. "Who just said that?" An awkward silence lengthens. "It's me, Brent." Oh, man. I force myself to sit down again and take a long, deep breath. "Brent, thanks for the initiative, but in a Sev1 incident, we need to announce and discuss any actions before taking them. The last thing we want to do is to make things worse and complicate establishing root cause." Before I can finish, someone at the other end of the table interrupts from behind his laptop. "Hey, the systems are back up again. Good work, Brent." Oh, come on. I press my lips together in frustration. Apparently, even undisciplined mobs can get lucky too. "Patty, wrap this up," I say. "I need to see you and Wes in our office immediately." I stand up and leave. I remain standing in Patty's office until I have both of their attention. Let me make myself clear. For Sev1 incidents, we cannot fly by the seat of our pants. Patty, from now on, as the person leading a Sev1 incident call, I need you to start the call presenting a timeline of all relevant events, especially changes. I'm holding you responsible for having that information close at hand, which should be easy since you also control the change process. That information comes from you, not all the yahoos on the conference call. Is that clear? Patty looks back at me, obviously frustrated. I resist the urge to soften my words. I know she's been working hard, and I've been piling even more onto her lately. "Yeah, totally clear," she says wearily. I'll work on documenting that process, and we'll institute it as quickly as I can.
Not good enough, I say. I want you to host practice incident calls and fire drills every 2 weeks. We need to get everyone used to solving problems in a methodical way and to have the timeline available before we go into that meeting. If we can't do this during a prearranged drill, how can we expect people to do it during an emergency? Seeing the discouraged expression on her face, I put my hand on her shoulder. Look, I appreciate all the work you're doing lately. It's important work, and I don't know what we'd do without you. Next, I turned to Wes. Impress upon Brent immediately that during emergencies, everyone must discuss changes they're thinking about, let alone the ones they actually implement. I can't prove it, but I'm guessing Brent caused the outage, and when he realized it, he undid the change. Wes is about to respond, but I cut him off. Put a stop to this, I say forcefully, pointing at him. No more unauthorized changes, and no more undisclosed changes during outages. Can you get your people under control or not? Wes looks surprised and studies my face for a moment. Yeah, I'm on it, boss. Wes and I spend nearly every waking hour late Tuesday and early Wednesday in the Phoenix War Room. The deployment is only 3 days away. As each day goes by, the worse it looks. It's a relief to head back to the change coordination room. As I walk in, most of the cab is here. The messy pile of index cards is gone. Instead, they're either hanging on one of the whiteboards on the wall or neatly organized on the table in front of the room, labeled Pending Changes. Welcome to our change management meeting, Patty begins. As you can see on the board, all of the standard changes have been scheduled. Today, we'll review and schedule all the high and medium risk changes. We'll then look at the change schedule to make any needed adjustments. I won't give away anything right now, but I think you'll see something that requires our attention. She picks up the first pile of cards. The first high-risk change is to a firewall submitted by John, scheduled for Friday. She then reads out the people who have been consulted and signed off on the proposed change. She prompts Wes and me. Bill and Wes, do you approve this to go on the board as a Friday change? I'm satisfied that there have been enough eyes on this, so I nod. Wes says, same for me. Hey, not bad. 23 seconds to approve our first change. We beat our previous time by 59 minutes. There is scattered applause. Patty doesn't disappoint as she goes through the remaining 8 high-risk changes, taking even less time for those. There is more applause while one of her staff posts the cards on the board. Patty picks up the medium-risk change stack. There were 147 standard changes submitted. I want to commend everyone for following the process and talking with the people that needed to be consulted. 90 of those changes are ready to be scheduled and have been posted. I've printed them out for everyone to review. Turning to Wes and me, she says, I sampled 10% of these, and for the most part, they look good. I'll keep track of problem trends, just in case some of these need more scrutiny going forward. Unless there are any objections, I think we're done with the medium-risk changes. There's actually a more pressing problem that we need to address. When Wes says, no objections from me, I nod for Patty to proceed, who merely gestures to the boards. I think I see what's wrong, but I stay quiet. One of the leads points to one of the boxes and says, how many changes are scheduled for Friday? Bingo. Patty flashes a small smile and says, 173. On the board, it's now very obvious that nearly half the changes were scheduled for Friday. Of the remaining, half are scheduled for Thursday, with the rest sprinkled earlier in the week. She continues, I'm not suggesting that 173 changes happening on Friday is bad, but I'm worried about change collisions and resource availability conflicts. Friday is also the day Phoenix is being deployed. If I were air traffic control, she continues, I'd say that the airspace is dangerously overcrowded. Anyone willing to change their flight plans? Someone says, I've got 3 that I'd like to do today, if no one minds. I don't want to be anywhere near the airport when Phoenix comes in for a landing. Yeah, well, lucky you, Wes mutters. Some of us have to be here on Friday. I can already see the flames pouring out of the wings.
2 other engineers ask for their changes to be moved earlier in the week. Patty has them go to the board to move their change cards, verifying that it wouldn't interfere with other changes already scheduled. 15 minutes later, the distribution of the cards on the change board is much more even. I'm less happy that everyone is moving their changes as far away from Friday as possible, like woodland creatures running away from a forest fire. Watching the change cards being moved around, something else starts to bother me. It's not just the images of carnage and mayhem around Phoenix. Instead, it has something to do with Eric and the MRP-8 plant. I keep staring at the cards. Patty interrupts my concentration. Bill, that concludes what we needed to get through. All the changes for the week are approved and scheduled. As I try to reorient myself, Wes says, You've done a really great job organizing this, Patty. You know I was one of your louder critics, but... He gestures at the board. All this is just terrific. There is a murmur of agreement, and Patty flushes visibly. Thanks. We're still in our first week of having a real change process, and this is the broadest participation we've ever had. But before we start patting ourselves on the back, how about we make it to a second week? Okay? I say, absolutely. Thanks for all the time you're putting into this, Patty. Keep up the great work. When the meeting adjourns, I stay behind, staring at the change board. Several times during this meeting, something flickered at the edge of my mind. Was it something that Eric said that I dismissed earlier? Something to do with work? Last Thursday, Wes and Patty did a manual inventory of all our projects, coming up with nearly 100 projects. It was manually generated by interviewing all the line workers. Those projects certainly represent 2 categories of work: business projects and internal IT projects. Looking at all the change cards on the wall, I realize that I'm looking at another collection of work that we once again manually generated. According to Patty, it's 437 discrete pieces of work. That's what we're doing this week. I realize that changes are the 3rd category of work. When Patty's people moved around the change cards from Friday to earlier in the week, they were changing our work schedule. Each of those change cards defined the work that my team was going to be doing that day. Sure, each of these changes is much smaller than an entire project, but it's still work. But what is the relationship between changes and projects? Are they equally important? And can it really be that before today, none of these changes were being tracked somewhere, in some sort of system? For that matter, where did all these changes come from? If changes are a type of work different than projects, does that mean that we're actually doing more than just the 100 projects? How many of these changes are to support one of the 100 projects? If it's not supporting one of those, should we really be working on it? If we had exactly the amount of resources to take on all our project work, does this mean we might not have enough cycles to implement all these changes? I debate with myself whether I'm on the verge of some large and meaningful insight. Eric asked me for my organization's equivalent to the job release desk on the plant floor. Does change management have anything to do with it? Suddenly, I laugh out loud at the absurd number of questions I've just asked myself. I feel like a one-man debate club. Or that Eric tricked me into doing some philosophical navel-gazing. Thinking for a moment, I decide there's value in knowing that changes represent yet another category of work, but don't know why. I've now identified 3 of the 4 categories of work. For a brief moment, I wonder what the 4th category of work is. Chapter 10. Thursday, September 11th. The next morning, bright and early, I'm back in the Phoenix War Room. Kirsten gives us a rundown of the most critical Phoenix project tasks at the beginning of each day. Because the stakes are so high, committed tasks are usually reported by the responsible manager as completed. No one wants to get on Kirsten's bad side, or Steve's for that matter. The bad news of the day comes from William Mason, Director of Quality Assurance, who works for Chris. Apparently they're still finding twice as many broken features as are getting fixed. It's never a good sign when pieces are falling off the car as it moves down the assembly line.
No wonder all of us are dreading the deployment date. I'm pondering how we can mitigate some of this risk when I hear Kirsten call Brent's name for the third time. And for the third time, Wes is having to explain why something didn't get done. Sarah says from the back of the room, "Wes, once again, we're getting bottlenecked by your people. Are there some personnel issues here that you need to be addressing?" Wes turns bright red and is about to respond when I quickly interject. "Kirsten, how many other tasks have been assigned to Brent?" Kirsten quickly replies, "As of today, there are 5 outstanding tasks. 3 were assigned last Wednesday, and 2 were assigned last Friday." "Okay, I'm on it," I say. "As soon as we're done here, I'll look into what's going on. Expect a status report by noon today, along with revised timelines for completion. I'll let you know if we require anything." On my walk over to Brent's cube in Building 7, I remind myself that my goal is to observe and seek to understand. After all, this guy has come up in conversation every day since I accepted my new role. Maybe Brent isn't actually as smart as we think. Or perhaps he is some technology Einstein, and any attempt to find similarly skilled people will fail. Or maybe he's deliberately sabotaging our attempts to take work away from him. But Brent seems professional and smart, not much different than many senior engineers I've worked with in the past. As I approach his desk, I hear him on the phone and typing away on his keyboard. He's sitting down in front of his 4 monitors with a headset on, typing something into a terminal application. I remain standing outside of his cube, discreetly listening in. He says, No. The database is up and running. Yeah, I know because it's right in front of me. Yes, I can do queries. Yes. No, I'm telling you, it has to be the application server. It's up? Okay, let me see. Wait, let me try doing a manual sync. Try it now. His cell phone rings. Wait a second, I've got another call coming in. I'll call you right back. He writes something down on a post-it note, putting it on his monitor next to 2 other post-it notes. Exasperated, he answers his cell phone. Yeah, Brent here. The what service is down? Have you tried rebooting it? Look, I'm really slammed right now with Phoenix. I'll get back to you later today. I'm in the middle of silently congratulating him when I hear him say, I don't even know who that is. The VP of what? Okay, let me have a look. I sigh, taking a seat in an empty cubicle to watch today's episode of A Day in the Life of Brent. He's on the phone for another 5 minutes, hanging up only after some critical production database is back up and running. I appreciate how Brent seems to genuinely care that everyone relying on IT systems can get their work done, but I'm dismayed that everyone seems to be using him as their free, personal geek squad, at the expense of Phoenix. Brent grabs one of the post-it notes off his monitor and picks up his phone. Before he can dial, though, I stand up and say, Hi, Brent. Ah! He shouts, startled. How long have you been there? Only for a couple of minutes, I say, putting on my most friendly smile, grabbing a seat next to him. Long enough to see you fix 2 people's problems. That's admirable, but I just came from Kirsten's daily Phoenix stand-up. There are 5 tasks that have been assigned to you, which are now late. I show him the 5 tasks from the project management meeting. He says quickly, I'm half done with all of these already. I just need a couple of hours of quiet working time to get this done. I'd do this from home if I could, but the network connection is too slow. Who's been calling you, and what do they want? I ask, frowning. Usually it's other IT people who are having problems fixing something, he replies, rolling his eyes. When something goes down, I'm apparently the only person who knows where to go looking. I thought Wes hired a bunch of people to take over some of these escalations from you, I say. Brent rolls his eyes again. That was the idea, but most had other responsibilities and were never available when we needed them. Others were let go during the downsizings because they weren't busy enough. Trust me, that was no big loss. I ended up handling most of those issues anyway. How many calls are you getting each day? Are you logging these calls anywhere? I ask. You mean, like in our ticketing system? No, because opening up a ticket for each of those calls would take longer than fixing the problem.
Brent says dismissively. The number of calls depend on the day. The last week has been worse than normal.
I get it now. I bet if anyone called right now and yelled loud enough or name-dropped someone scary enough, Brent could be dragged into fixing someone else's problem for hours on end. You tried to push back on the last person who called. What made you decide to work the issue instead of telling them to go pound sand? I ask. He replies,
She told me that the VP of Logistics was screaming that replenishment orders weren't getting created, and that if it didn't get fixed right away, our stores were at risk of stocking out on fast-moving products. I didn't want to be the person being called out for single-handedly allowing stockouts to happen in the stores.
I purse my lips. Company executives strong-arming my engineers into doing their bidding is total bullshit. But jeopardizing Phoenix is above their pay grade. Standing up, I say, Okay, from here on out, you're working only on Phoenix. Steve Masters has said that this is everyone's top priority. Now more than ever, the project needs you. I'm expecting you to reject any task that anyone tries to assign you. Brent looks simultaneously relieved and concerned. Maybe he's thinking about that VP of Logistics. I add, If anyone contacts you about anything besides Phoenix, send them to Wes. Let him deal with all the jackasses. He says skeptically,
Look, I appreciate this, but I really don't think this is going to work in the long run. Our guys around here just don't seem up to speed with how all our systems work. In the end, they keep coming to me.
Well, they're going to have to learn. When they call, send them to Wes. If anyone's got a problem with that, then send them to me. In fact, put a vacation message on your email saying that you're not responding to anything except for Phoenix and to instead contact, at my prompting, Brent says with a small smile,
Wes.
See? You're already getting the hang of it. I smile in return. I point to his desk phone. Do whatever it takes to break people of the habit of going directly to you. You've got my permission to turn off your phone ringer and change your voicemail greeting to say you're not available and to contact Wes instead. Whatever it takes. Realizing that I'm distracting Brent from Phoenix by just standing here, I say quickly, No, I'll have my assistant Ellen change your voicemail greeting for you. Brent smiles again and says,
No, I can do that. Thanks for the offer, though.
I write my cell phone number on a post-it note and hand it to him. Ellen will do it. We need you on those Phoenix tasks. Call if you need anything from me. When he nods, I start heading back to Building 9, but then turn around to ask, Hey, let me buy you a beer sometime next week. He agrees, his expression brightening. As I leave the building, I immediately call Patty. When she picks up, I say, Grab Wes and meet me outside the Phoenix War Room. We need to change the way we're managing escalations to Brent. Right now. We all sit down in the conference room across the hallway from the Phoenix War Room. How'd it go with Brent? Wes asks. When I tell him that Brent wasn't able to work on Phoenix because of all the break-fix work, he blanches. He's been in all these emergency meetings. How can he possibly think anything is more important than Phoenix? I say, Good question. Why would Brent drop Phoenix to work on something else? Wes's bluster disappears for a couple of moments. Probably because someone like me was screaming at him, saying that I absolutely needed his help to get my most important task done. And it's probably true. For way too many things, Brent seems to be the only one who knows how they actually work. If it were me, I'd try to justify it by saying that it would only take a couple of minutes, Patty says. Which could be true, but it's like death by 1,000 cuts. Processes are supposed to protect people. We need to figure out how to protect Brent, I say. I then describe how I already told Brent to send everyone wanting anything to Wes. What? You want me to micromanage all of his time? I don't have time to be Brent's secretary or be some sort of help desk person, he shouts. Okay, what's on your plate that's more important than making sure your resources are getting critical Phoenix work done? I ask. Wes looks back at me for several moments stonily, and then laughs. Okay, you got me. Look, Brent is a smart guy, but he's also one of the worst people I've ever met at writing anything down.
Let me tell you a real story of how impossible this is going to be. Several months ago, we were 3 hours into a Sev 1 outage, and we bent over backward not to escalate to Brent. But eventually, we got to a point where we were just out of ideas, and we were starting to make things worse. So we put Brent on the problem. He shakes his head, recalling the memory. He sat down at the keyboard, and it's like he went into this trance. 10 minutes later, the problem is fixed. Everyone is happy and relieved that the system came back up, but then someone asked, "How did you do it?" And I swear to God, Brent just looked back at him blankly and said, "I have no idea. I just did it." Wes thumps the table and says, "And that is the problem with Brent. How the hell do you document that? Close your eyes and go into a trance?" Patty laughs, apparently recalling the story. She says, "I'm not suggesting Brent is doing this deliberately, but I wonder whether Brent views all his knowledge as a sort of power. Maybe some part of him is reluctant to give that up. It does put him in this position where he's virtually impossible to replace." Maybe not, I say. I'll tell you what I do know, though. Every time that we let Brent fix something that none of us can replicate, Brent gets a little smarter, and the entire system gets dumber. We've got to put an end to that. Maybe we create a resource pool of level 3 engineers to handle the escalations, but keep Brent out of that pool. The level 3s would be responsible for resolving all incidents to closure, and would be the only people who can get access to Brent. On one condition. If they want to talk with Brent, they must first get Wes's or my approval, I say. They'd be responsible for documenting what they've learned, and Brent would never be allowed to work on the same problem twice. I'd review each of the issues weekly, and if I find out that Brent worked a problem twice, there will be hell to pay, for both the level 3s and Brent. I add, based on Wes's story, we shouldn't even let Brent touch the keyboard. He's allowed to tell people what to type and shoulder surf, but under no condition will we allow him to do something that we can't document afterward. Is that clear? That's great, Patty says. At the end of each incident, we'll have one more article in our knowledge base of how to fix a hairy problem and a growing pool of people who can execute the fix. Wes doesn't look completely convinced, but he eventually laughs. I like it too. We'll treat him like Hannibal Lecter. When we need him, we'll put him into a straitjacket, tie him to a wheelchair, and cart him out. I laugh. Patty adds, to prevent another Brent escalation, we should log every keystroke and record the terminal session. Maybe even have someone follow him around with a video camera and turn on audit logging so we know exactly what he changed. I like it, although it sounds a bit extreme. However, I suspect that it will take extreme measures to get us out of this situation. I venture, maybe we take away his production access, so the only way the work can get done is him telling the level 3s what to do. Wes guffaws. He might quit if we did that right away. So, who do we have that's available to put into this level 3 resource pool? I ask. He hesitates. Well, we have the 2 hires we made a year ago that were meant to help shore up Brent. One is working on creating server build standards, but we can take her off of that temporarily. There are 2 other engineers that we identified for cross-training years ago, but we never had the time to pursue it further. So that's 3 people. Chapter 12. Friday, September 12th. It's 7:30 p.m. on Friday, 2 hours after the Phoenix deployment was scheduled to start, and things are not going well. I'm starting to associate the smell of pizza with the futility of a death march. The entire IT operations team was assembled in preparation for the deployment at 4 p.m., but there was nothing to do because we hadn't received anything from Chris's team. They were still making last-minute changes. It's not a good sign when they're still attaching parts to the space shuttle at liftoff time. At 4:30 p.m., William had stormed into the Phoenix war room, livid and disgusted that no one could get all of the Phoenix code to run in the test environment. Worse, the few parts of Phoenix that were running were failing critical tests. William started sending back critical bug reports to the developers, many of whom had already gone home for the day. Chris had to call them back in, and William's team had to wait for the developers to send them new versions.
My team wasn't just sitting around, twiddling our thumbs. Instead, we were frantically working with William's team to try to get all of Phoenix to come up in the test environment. Because if they couldn't get things running in a test environment, we wouldn't have a prayer of being able to deploy and run it in production. My gaze shifts from the clock to the conference table. Brent and 3 other engineers are huddling with their QA counterparts. They've been working frantically since 4 p.m., and they already look haggard. Many have laptops open to Google searches, and others are systematically fiddling with settings for the servers, operating systems, databases, and the Phoenix application, trying to figure out how to bring everything up, which the developers had assured them was possible. One of the developers had actually walked in a couple of minutes ago and said, "Look, it's running on my laptop, how hard can it be?" Wes started swearing, while 2 of our engineers and 3 of William's engineers started poring through the developer's laptop, trying to figure out what made it different from the test environment. In another area of the room, an engineer is talking heatedly to somebody on the phone. "Yes, we copied the file that you gave us. Yes, it's version 1.0.13. "What do you mean it's the wrong version?" "What? When did you change that?" "Copy it now and try again." "Okay, look, but I'm telling you this isn't going to work." "I think it's a networking problem." "What do you mean we need to open up a firewall port? Why the hell didn't you tell us this 2 hours ago?" He then slams the phone down hard, and then pounds the table with his fist, yelling, "Idiots!" Brent looks up from the developer laptop, rubbing his eyes with fatigue. "Let me guess. The front end can't talk to the database server because someone didn't tell us we need to open a firewall port?" The engineer nods with exhausted fury and says, "I cannot freaking believe this. I was on the phone with that jackass for 20 minutes, and it never occurred to him that it wasn't a code problem. This is FUBAR." I continue to listen quietly, but I'm nodding in agreement at his prognosis. In the Marines, we use the term FUBAR. Watching tempers fray, I look at my watch. 7:37 p.m. It's time to get a management gut check from my team. I round up Wes and Patty and look around for William. I find him staring over the shoulder of one of his engineers. I ask him to join us. He looks puzzled for a moment because we don't normally interact, but he nods and follows us to my office. "Okay, guys, tell me what you think of this situation," I ask. Wes speaks up first. "Those guys are right. This is FUBAR. We're still getting incomplete releases from the developers. In the past 2 hours, I've already seen 2 instances when they've forgotten to give us several critical files, which guaranteed that the code wouldn't run. And as you've seen, we still don't know how to configure the test environment so that Phoenix actually comes up cleanly." He shakes his head again. "Based on what I've seen in the last half hour, I think we've actually moved backward." Patty just shakes her head with disgust and waves her hand, adding nothing. I say to William, "I know we haven't worked much together, but I'd really like to know what you think. How's it looking from your perspective?" He looks down, exhaling slowly, and then says, "I honestly have no idea. The code is changing so fast that we're having problems keeping up. If I were a betting man, I'd say Phoenix is going to blow up in production. I've talked with Chris a couple of times about stopping the release, but he and Sarah ran right over me." I ask him, "What do you mean by you can't keep up?" "When we find problems in our testing, we send it back to development to have them fix it," he explains. "Then, they'll send back a new release. The problem is that it takes about a half hour to get everything set up and running, and then another 3 hours to execute the smoke test. In that time, we'll have probably gotten 3 more releases from development." I smirk at the reference to smoke tests, a term circuit designers use. The saying goes, if you turn the circuit board on and no smoke comes out, it'll probably work. He shakes his head and says, "We have yet to make it through the smoke test. I'm concerned that we no longer have sufficient version control. We've gotten so sloppy about keeping track of version numbers of the entire release. Each time they fix something, they're usually breaking something else, so they're sending single files over instead of the entire package." He continues,
It's so chaotic right now that even if by some miracle Phoenix does pass the smoke test, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be able to replicate it, because there are too many moving parts. Taking off his glasses, he says with finality, "This is probably going to be an all-nighter for everyone. I think there's genuine risk that we won't have anything up and running at 8 a.m. tomorrow when the stores open. And that's a big problem." That is a huge understatement. If the release isn't finished by 8 a.m., the point-of-sale systems in the stores used to check out customers won't work, and that means we won't be able to complete customer transactions. Wes is nodding. William is right. We're definitely going to be here all night, and performance is worse than even I thought it would be. We're going to need at least another 20 servers to spread the load, and I don't know where we can find so many on such short notice. I have some people scrambling to find any spare hardware. Maybe we'll even have to cannibalize servers in production. Is it too late to stop the deployment? I ask. When exactly is the point of no return? That's a very good question, Wes answers slowly. I'd have to check with Brent, but I think we could stop the deployment now with no issues. But when we start converting the database so it can take orders from both the in-store POS systems and Phoenix, we are committed. At this rate, I don't think that will be for a couple of hours yet. I nod. I've heard what I needed to hear. Guys, I'm going to send out an email to Steve, Chris, and Sarah to see if I can delay the deployment. And then I'm going to find Steve. Maybe I can get us one more week. But hell, even getting one more day would be a win. Any thoughts? Wes, Patty, and William all just shake their heads glumly, saying nothing. I turn to Patty. Go work with William to figure out how we can get some better traffic coordination in the releases. Get over to where the developers are and play air traffic controller, and make sure everything is labeled and versioned on their side. And then let Wes and team know what's coming over. We need better visibility and someone to keep people following process over there. I want a single entry point for code drops, controlled hourly releases, documentation. Get my drift? She says, It would be my pleasure. I'll head up to the Phoenix War Room for starters. I'll kick down the door if that's what it takes and say, We're here to help. I give them all a nod of thanks and head to my laptop to write my email. From Bill Palmer, to Steve Masters, CC, Chris Anderson, Wes Davis, Patty McKee, Sarah Moulton, William Mason. Date, September 12th, 7:45 p.m. Priority, highest. Subject, urgent. Phoenix deployment in major trouble. My recommendation, 1 week delay. Steve, first off, let me state that I want Phoenix in production as much as anyone else. I understand how important it is to the company. However, based on what I've seen, I believe we will not have Phoenix up by the tomorrow 8 a.m. deadline. There is significant risk that this may even impact the in-store POS systems. After discussions with William, I recommend that we delay the Phoenix launch by 1 week to increase the likelihood that Phoenix achieves its goals and avert what I believe will be a near-certain disaster. I think we're looking at problems on the scale of the November 1999 Thanksgiving Toys R Us train wreck, meaning multi-day outages and performance problems that potentially put customer and order data at risk. Steve, I will be calling you in just a couple of minutes. Regards, Bill. I take a moment to collect my thoughts and call Steve, who answers on the first ring. Steve, it's Bill. I just sent out an email to you, Sarah, and Chris. I cannot overstate how badly this rollout has gone so far. This is going to bite us in the ass. Even William agrees. My team is now extremely concerned that the rollout will not complete in time for the stores to open at 8 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. That could disrupt the store's ability to take sales, as well as probably cause midday outages to the website. It's not too late to stop this train wreck, I implore. Failure means that we'll have problems taking orders from anyone, whether they're in the stores or on the internet. Failure could mean jeopardizing and screwing up order data and customer records, which means losing customers. Delaying by a week would just mean disappointing customers, but at least they'll come back. Steve breathes into the phone and then replies, It sounds bad, but at this point, we don't have a choice. We have to keep going.
Marketing already bought weekend newspaper ads announcing the availability of Phoenix. They're bought, paid for, and being delivered to homes across the country. Our partners are all lined up and ready to go. Flabbergasted, I say, "Steve, just how bad does it have to be for you to delay this release? I'm telling you that we could be taking a reckless level of risk in this rollout." He pauses for several moments. "Tell you what, if you can convince Sarah to postpone the rollout, let's talk. Otherwise, keep pushing." "Are you kidding me? She's the one who's created this kamikaze mess." Before I can stop myself, I hang up on Steve. For a brief moment, I consider calling him back to apologize. As much as I hate to, I feel like I owe the company one last try to stop this insanity, which means talking to Sarah in person. Back in the Phoenix war room, it's stuffy and rank from too many people sweating from tension and fear. Sarah is sitting by herself, typing away at her laptop. I call out to her. "Sarah, can we talk?" She gestures to the chair next to her, saying, "Sure, what's up?" When I say in a lowered voice, "Let's talk in the hallway." As we walk out together in silence, I ask her, "From up here, how does it look like the release is going?" She says non-committally, "You know how these things go when we're trying to be nimble, right? There's always unforeseen things when it comes to technology. If you want to make omelets, you've got to be willing to break some eggs." I think it's a bit worse than your usual rollout. I trust you saw my email, right? She merely says, "Yes, of course. And you saw my reply?" Shit. I say, "No. But before you explain, I want to make sure you understand the implications and the risks we're posing to the business." And then I repeat almost word for word what I told Steve just minutes before. Not surprisingly, Sarah is unimpressed. As soon as I stop talking, she says, "We've all been busting ass getting Phoenix this far. Marketing is ready, development is ready, everyone is ready but you. I've told you before, but apparently you're not listening. Perfection is the enemy of good. We've got to keep going." Marveling at this colossal waste of time, I just shake my head and say, "No, lack of competence is the enemy of good. Mark my words, we're going to be picking up the pieces for days, if not weeks, because of your dumb decisions." As I storm back into the knock, I read Sarah's email, which makes me even more furious. I resist the urge to reply and add fuel to the fire. I also resist the emotional desire to delete it. I may need it to cover my ass later. From Sarah Moulton, to Bill Palmer, Steve Masters, CC, Chris Anderson, Wes Davis, Patty McKee, William Mason. Date, September 12th, 8:15 p.m. Priority, highest. Subject, urgent, Phoenix deployment in major trouble. My recommendation, 1 week delay. Everyone is ready but you. Marketing, dev, project management all have given this project their all. Now it's your turn. We must go. Sarah. Suddenly I panic for a brief moment that I haven't told Paige anything for hours. I send her a quick text message. Night keeps getting worse. Am here for at least a couple more hours. Will catch you in AM. Love you. Wish me luck, darling. I feel a tap on my shoulder and turn around to see Wes. Boss, we've got a very serious problem. The expression on his face is enough to make me scared. I quickly stand up and follow him to the other side of the room. Remember when we hit the point of no return around 9 p.m.? I've been tracking the progress of the Phoenix database conversion, and it's thousands of times slower than we thought it would be. It was supposed to complete hours ago, but it's only 10% complete. That means all the data won't be converted until Tuesday. We are totally screwed. Maybe I'm more tired than I thought, but I'm not following him. I say, "Why is this a problem?" Wes tries again. That script needs to complete before the POS systems can come up. We can't stop the script, and we can't restart it. Apparently there's nothing we can do to make it go faster. I think we can hack Phoenix so that it can run, but I don't know about the in-store POS systems. We don't have any to test with in the lab. Holy crap. I think twice before I ask, Brent? He just shakes his head. I had him look at it for a couple of minutes. He thinks that someone turned on database indexing too soon, which is slowing down the inserts. There's nothing we can do about it now, though, without screwing up data. I put him back on the Phoenix deployment. How is everything else going? I ask, wanting a full assessment of the situation. Any improvement on performance? Any update on the database maintenance tools? Performance is still terrible, he says. I think there's a huge memory leak, and that's even without any users on it. My guys suspect we're going to have to reboot a bunch of the servers every couple of hours just to keep it from blowing up. Damn developers. He continues. We've scrounged up 15 more servers, some of them new and some yanked from various corners of the company. And now, believe it or not, we don't have enough space in the data center racks to deploy them. We have to do a big recabling and racking job, moving crap around. Patty just put a call out and brought in a whole bunch of her people to help with that. I feel my eyebrows hit my hairline in genuine surprise. And then I bend forward, laughing. I say, oh dear God, we finally find servers to deploy, and now we can't find space to put them in. Amazing. We just can't get a break. Wes shakes his head. You know, I've heard stories like this from my buddies, but this may turn out to be the mother of all deployment failures. He continues. Here's the most amazing part. We made a huge investment in virtualization, which was supposed to save us from things like this. But when development couldn't fix the performance problems, they blamed the virtualization. So we had to move everything back onto physical servers. And to think that Chris proposed this aggressive rollout date because virtualization would save our asses. I wipe my eyes and force myself to stop laughing. And how about the database support tools the developers promised us? Wes immediately stops smiling. Absolute garbage. Our guys are going to have to manually edit the database to correct all the errors Phoenix is generating, and we're going to have to manually trigger replenishments. We're still learning about how much of this type of manual work Phoenix is going to require. It's going to be very error-prone and take a ton of people to do. I wince, thinking about how this will tie up even more of our guys, doing menial work that the broken application should be doing. Nothing worries auditors more than direct edits of data without audit trails and proper controls. You're doing a great job here. Our top priority is finding out what the effect of the incomplete database conversion will be on the in-store POS system. Find someone who knows those things inside and out and get their thoughts. If necessary, call someone on Sarah's team who handles day-to-day retail operations. Bonus points if you can get your hands on a POS device and server we can log into to see what the impact is ourselves. Got it, Wes says, nodding. I know just the person to put on this. I watch him head off and then look around, trying to figure out where I can be the most useful. The morning light is starting to stream in from the windows, showing the accumulated mess of coffee cups, papers, and all sorts of other debris. In the corner, a developer is asleep under some chairs. I had just run to the bathroom to wash my face and wipe the grime from my teeth. I feel a little fresher, but it's been years since I've pulled an all-nighter. Maggie Lee is the Senior Director of Retail Program Management and works for Sarah. She is kicking off the 7 a.m. emergency meeting, and there are nearly 30 people packed into the room. In a tired voice, she says, "It's been a night of heroics, and I appreciate everyone doing what it takes to hit our Phoenix commitments. As you know, the reason for this emergency meeting is that something went wrong in the database conversion," she continues. "That means all the in-store POS systems will be down, which means that the stores will not have working cash registers. That means manual tills and manual card swipes." She adds, "The good news is that the Phoenix website is up and running." She gestures at me and says, "My thanks to Bill and the entire IT operations crew for making this happen." Irritated, I say, I'd far rather have those POS systems up instead of Phoenix. All hell is breaking loose in the knock. All our phones have been lit up for the past hour because people in the stores are all screaming that their systems aren't responding. It's like the Jerry Lewis telethon down there. Like all of you, my voicemail has already filled up from the staff in our 120 stores. We're going to need to pull in more people just to man the phones. A phone vibrates somewhere on the table as if to punctuate my point. We need to get proactive here, I say to Sarah. We need to send out a summary to everyone in the stores as quickly as possible, outlining what's happened and more specific instructions on how to conduct operations without the POS systems. Sarah momentarily looks blank and then says, "That's a good idea. How about you take a first cut at the email and we'll take it from there?" Dumbfounded, I say, "What? I'm not a store manager. How about your group takes the first cut and Chris and I can make sure it's accurate?" Chris nods. Sarah looks around the room. "Okay, we'll get something together in the next couple of hours." "Are you kidding me?" I shout. "Stores on the East Coast start opening in less than an hour. We need to get something out there now." "I'll take care of it," says Maggie, raising her hand. She immediately opens up her laptop and starts typing. As I squeeze my head between my hands to see if I can make my headache hurt less, I wonder how much worse this rollout could get. By 2 p.m. Saturday, it's pretty clear that the bottom is a lot further down than I thought possible. All stores are now operating in total manual fallback mode. All sales are being processed by those manual credit card imprint machines, with the carbon paper imprints being stored in shoeboxes. Store managers have had employees running to the local office supply stores to find more carbon paper slips for the card imprint machines, as well as to the bank so they could give out correct change. Customers using the Phoenix website are complaining about how it is either down or so slow as to be unusable. We have even managed to turn into a Twitter trending topic. All of our customers who had been excited to try our new service started complaining about our big IT fail after seeing our TV and newspaper ads. Those customers who were able to order online had a rude awakening when they went to the store to pick up their order. That's when we discovered that Phoenix seemed to be randomly losing transactions, and in other cases, it was double or triple charging our customers' credit cards. Furious that we've potentially lost integrity of the sales order data, Anne from finance drove in and her team has now set up another war room across the hallway, fielding calls from the stores to handle problem orders. By noon, there were piles of papers from hundreds of pissed-off customers that were being faxed in from the stores. To support Anne, Wes brought in even more engineers to create some tools for Anne's staff to use, in order to process the ever-growing backlog of screwed-up transactions. As I walk past the knock table for the third time, I decide that I'm too exhausted to be of use to anyone. It's almost 2:30 p.m. Wes is arguing with someone across the room, so I wait until he's done. I say to him, "Let's face up to the fact that this is going to be a multi-day ordeal. How are you holding up?" He yawns and replies, "I managed to get an hour of sleep." "Wow, you look terrible. Go home and get a couple of hours yourself. I've got a handle on everything here. I'll call you if anything comes up." Too tired to argue, I thank him and leave. I wake with a start when I hear my cell phone ring. I bolt up and grab my phone. It's 4:30 p.m. Wes is calling. I shake my head to gain some semblance of alertness and then answer. "What's up?" I hear him say, "Bad news. In short, it's all over Twitter that the Phoenix website is leaking customer credit card numbers. They're even posting screenshots. Apparently, when you empty your shopping cart, the session crashes and displays the credit card number of the last successful order. I've already jumped out of bed and am heading to the bathroom to get showered. Call John. He's going to have kittens. There's probably some protocol for this, involving tons of paperwork and maybe even law enforcement. And probably lawyers, too." Wes replies, "I've already called him. He and his team are on the way in, and he is pissed. He sounded just like that dude from Pulp Fiction.
He even quoted the line about the day of reckoning and striking people down with great vengeance and furious anger. I laugh. I love that scene with John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson. It's not how I would have typecast our mild-mannered CISO, but as they say, you always have to watch out for the quiet ones. I take a quick shower. I run into the kitchen and grab a couple of sticks of the string cheese our son loves to eat. I take these with me in the car and start my drive back into the office. When I get on the highway, I call Paige. She answers on the first ring. "Darling, where have you been? I'm at work and the kids are with my mom." I say, "I was actually home for an hour. I fell asleep the instant I crawled into bed, but Wes just called. Apparently the Phoenix application started showing the entire world people's credit card numbers. It's a huge security breach, so I'm driving back in right now." I hear her sigh disapprovingly. "You've been there for over 10 years, and you've never worked these kinds of hours. I'm really not sure I like this promotion." "You and me both, honey," I say. Chapter 13. Monday, September 15th. By Monday, the Phoenix crisis is a public fiasco. We made it onto the front page news of all the technology sites. There are rumors that someone from the Wall Street Journal was trying to get Steve for an on-the-record interview. I start with a jolt when I think I hear Steve mention my name. Completely disoriented, I look around and realize that I'm at work and that I must have fallen asleep while waiting for the Phoenix status meeting to start. I sneak a peek at my watch. 11:04 a.m. I have to look at my phone to figure out that it's Monday. For a moment, I wonder where my Sunday went, but seeing Steve red-faced and addressing the entire room makes me pay attention. "Don't care one bit whose fault this is. You can bet your ass that this won't ever happen again on my watch. But right now, I don't give two shits about the future. We are massively screwing our customers and shareholders. All I want to hear about is how we're going to dig ourselves out of this hole and restore normal business operations." He turns and points at Sarah, saying, "And you are not off the hook until every one of your store managers says that they can transact normally. Manual card swipes? What are we, in some third world country?" Sarah replies calmly, "I totally understand how unacceptable this is. I'm making sure my entire staff knows that they are accountable and responsible." "No," Steve responds quickly and gravely. "You are ultimately accountable and responsible. Do not forget that." My heart actually lightens for a moment, as I wonder whether Steve has broken free of Sarah's spell. Turning his attention back to the entire room, he says gravely, "When the store managers say that we're no longer operating on life support, I need 15 minutes from each and every person who had a hand in this. I expect you to clear your calendar. No excuses. That means you, Sarah, Chris, Bill, Kirsten, Anne, and even you, John," he says, pointing at people as he names them. "Way to go, John. You picked a great time to finally get noticed by Steve." He continues, "I'll be back in 2 hours after I get on a phone call with another journalist because of this mess." His door slam shakes the walls. Sarah breaks the silence. "Well, you all heard Steve. Not only do we need to get the POS systems up, but we must also get the Phoenix usability issues fixed. The press is having a heyday with the clunkiness of the ordering interface and everything timing out." "Are you out of your mind?" I say, leaning forward. "We are keeping Phoenix alive by sheer heroics. Wes wasn't joking when he said that we're proactively rebooting all the front-end servers every hour. We can't introduce any more instabilities. I propose code rollouts only twice a day and restricting all code changes to those affecting performance." To my surprise, Chris immediately chimes in. "I agree. William, what do you think?" William nods. "Absolutely. I suggest we announce to the developers that all code commits must have a defect number that corresponds to a performance problem. Anything that doesn't will get rejected." Chris says, "That good enough for you, Bill?"
Pleased with the solution, I say, "Perfect." Although Wes and Patty seem simultaneously pleased and taken aback by this sudden cooperation from development, Sarah is not pleased. She says, "I don't agree. We've got to be able to respond to the market, and the market is telling us that Phoenix is too hard to use. We can't afford to screw this up." Chris replies, "Look, the time for usability testing and validation was months ago. If we didn't get it right the first time, we're not going to get it right without some real work. Have your product managers work on their revised mock-ups and proposals. We'll try to get it in as soon as we can after the crisis is over." I affirm his position, saying, "I agree." "You raise some good points. I approve," she says, apparently realizing that she wasn't going to win this argument. I'm not sure Sarah is actually in a position to approve anything, but luckily, the discussion turns quickly to how to regain POS functionality. I revise my opinion of Chris upward a couple of notches. I still think he was a willing accomplice of Sarah's, but maybe I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Leaving the Phoenix War Room, I see the room across the hallway where Anne and her team handle problem orders. I'm overcome by a sudden curiosity, genuinely wanting to see how they're doing. I knock and walk in, still chewing a stale bagel from the meeting. Since Saturday, there has been an endless supply of pizzas, pastries, Jolt colas, and coffee to keep all the troops at their tasks. Before me is a scene of frenetic activity. There are tables covered with piles of incoming faxes from the stores, and 12 people walk from one to the next. Each fax is a problem order waiting to be routed to an army of finance and customer service representatives who have been press-ganged into service. Their job was to either deduplicate or reverse every one of these transactions. In front of me, 4 finance people are sitting at another table, their fingers flying across 10-key calculators and open laptops. They're manually tabulating the orders, trying to calculate the scale of the disaster and doing reconciliations to catch any mistakes. On the wall, they're keeping track of the totals. So far, 5,000 customers have had either duplicate payments or missing orders, and there are an estimated 25,000 more transactions that still need to be investigated. I shake my head in disbelief. Steve is right. We massively screwed the customers this time. It's downright embarrassing. On the other hand, I have to respect the operation the finance people have put in place to handle the mess. It looks organized, with people doing what needs to get done. A voice next to me says, "Another Phoenix train wreck, huh?" It's John, taking in the scene with me. He's not saying, "I told you so," but almost. With him, of course, is his ever-present black 3-ring binder. John smacks his face with his palm. If this were happening to our competitor, I'd be laughing my ass off. I told Chris over and over about this possibility, but he wouldn't listen. We're paying for it now. He walks up to one of the tables and starts looking over people's shoulders. I see his body suddenly tense as he picks a pile of papers up. He flips through the papers, his face ashen. He returns to where I'm standing and whispers, "Bill, we've got a major problem. Outside, now." "Look at this order slip," he hisses as we stand outside. "Do you see the problem here?" I look at the page. It's a scanned order slip, slanted and low resolution. It's for a purchase of various auto parts, and the dollar amount seems reasonable at $53. I say, "Why don't you just tell me?" John points to a handwritten number scrawled by the scanned credit card and customer signature. That 3-digit number is the CVV2 code on the back of the credit card. That's there to prevent credit card fraud. Under the payment card industry rules, we are not allowed to store or transmit anything on track 2 of the magnetic card stripe. Even possessing this is an automatic cardholder data breach and an automatic fine. Maybe even front-page news. Oh no, not again. He continues, as if reading my mind. Yeah, but worse this time. Instead of just being on the local news, Imagine Steve being splashed on the front page of every market where we have customers and stores, and then flying to D.C. to be grilled by senators on behalf of all their outraged constituents. He continues, "This is really serious. Bill, we've got to destroy all of this information immediately." I shake my head, saying, "No way. We've got to process every one of those orders so that we don't charge or even double charge our customers. We're obligated to do this. Otherwise, we're taking money from them that we'll eventually need to return." John puts his hand on my shoulder. "That may seem important, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. We're already in deep shit because Phoenix leaked cardholder data. This may be just as bad. We get fined according to the number of cardholders affected." He gestures at all the papers, saying, "This could be more than double our fines. And you think our audits are bad now? This will make them 10 times more painful because they'll classify us as a level 1 merchant for the rest of eternity. They may even raise our transaction fees from 3% to who knows how high. That could halve our retail store profit margins and—" He stops mid-sentence and opens up his 3-ring binder to a calendar. "Oh shit. The PCI auditors are on site today doing a business process walkthrough. They're on the 2nd floor, interviewing the order administration staff about our operations. They're even supposed to use this conference room." "You've got to be kidding me," I say as the feeling of panic starts to set in, which amazes me considering that it's been 3 days of constant adrenaline. I turn to look through the window of the conference door and see very clearly all the finance people handling all the customer problem orders. Shit. "Look," I say, "I know that sometimes people think you're not on our side, but I really need your help. You've got to keep the auditors off this floor, maybe even out of this building. I'll put up some curtains on the windows, or maybe even barricade the door." John looks at me and then nods. "Okay, I'll handle the auditors. But I still don't think you fully understand. As the custodians of cardholder data, we cannot allow hundreds of people to have access to it. The risk of theft and fraud is too high. We've got to destroy the data immediately." I can't help but laugh for a moment at the endless stream of problems. Forcing myself to focus, I say slowly, "Okay, I'll make sure the finance people understand this and handle it. Maybe we can get them all scanned and shipped to an offshore firm for them to enter." No, that's even worse," he says. "Remember, we're not allowed to transmit it, let alone send it to a third party. Understand? Look, just so we can claim plausible deniability, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that just now. You've got to figure out how to destroy all this prohibited data." I get pissed off at John's mention of plausible deniability, regardless of whether it was well-intentioned or not. I take a deep breath and say to him, "Keep those auditors off this floor, and I'll worry about the card imprints. Okay?" He nods and says, "Roger. I'll call you when I park the auditors somewhere safe." As I watch him walk quickly down the hallway to the stairway, I keep thinking to myself, he's only doing his job. He's only doing his job. I swear under my breath and turn back around to look back at the conference room. And now I see the big printed sign hanging on the door, proclaiming Phoenix POS Recovery War Room. Suddenly, I feel like I'm in the movie Weekend at Bernie's, where some teenage boys keep trying to hide or disguise a dead body from a hitman. Then I wonder if this is more like the massive around-the-clock shredding operation that allegedly happened at the offices of Arthur Anderson, the audit firm investigated after Enron failed. Am I complicit in destroying important evidence? What a mess. I shake my head and walk back into the conference room to deliver the bad news. I finally get back down to the knock at 2:30 p.m., and survey the carnage as I make my way to my office. 7 extra tables have been set up to make more meeting spaces, and there are people assembled around each of them. Empty pizza boxes are piled up on many of the tables and in one corner of the room. I take a seat behind my desk, sighing in relief. I spent almost an hour with Anne's team on the cardholder data issue, and then another half hour arguing with them that this is really their problem, not mine. I told them that I could help, but that my team was too tied up trying to keep Phoenix running to take any more responsibility. I realize with some amazement that this may have been the first time I've been able to say no to anyone in the company since I started in this role. I wonder if I could have done it if we weren't the people almost single-handedly keeping our store order entry systems up. As I ponder this, my phone rings. It's John. I answer quickly, wanting an update on the auditor issue. "Hey, John, how's it going?" John replies, "Not terrible. I've got the auditors set up right next to me here in Building 7. I've rearranged it so that all the interviews will be done here. They won't go anywhere near the Phoenix War Room, and I've told the Building 9 security people explicitly not to let them pass the front desk." I chuckle at seeing John bend all the rules. "That's great. Thanks for pulling all that together. Also, I think Anne could use your help figuring what exactly it takes to stay in compliance with the cardholder data regulations. I helped as best as I could, but..." John says, "No problem. I'm happy to assist." He hesitates for a couple of moments. "I hate to bring it up now, but you were supposed to give internal audit the SOX 404 response letter today. How is that coming along?" I burst out in laughter. "John, our plan was to get that report done over the weekend after the Phoenix deployment. But as you know, things didn't quite go as planned. I doubt anyone has worked on it since Friday." In a very concerned voice, John says, "You know that the entire audit committee looks at this, right? If we blow this deadline, it's like a red flag to everyone that we have severe control issues. This could drive up the length of the external audit, too." I say as reasonably as I can, "Trust me. If there was anything I could do, I would. But right now, my entire team has been working around the clock to support the Phoenix recovery efforts. Even if they completed the report, and all I had to do was bend over and pick it up, I couldn't. We're that far underwater." As I'm talking, I realize how liberating it is to state that my team is absolutely at capacity, and that there aren't any calories left over for any new tasks. And people actually believe me. I hear John say, "You know, I could free 2 engineers up. Maybe they could help do some of the legwork around estimating the remediation effort. Or, if you need it, we could even put them into the technical resource pool to help with recovery. They're both very technical and experienced." My ears perk up. We've got everyone deployed doing all sorts of things that this emergency requires, and most have pulled at least one all-nighter. Some are monitoring fragile services and systems. Others are helping field phone calls from the store managers. Others are helping QA build systems and write tests. Some are helping development reproduce problems. I say immediately, "That would be incredibly helpful. Send Wes an email with a couple of bullet points on each of your engineers. If he doesn't have an urgent need for their skills, I'll task them on generating the remediation estimates, as long as it doesn't require interrupting anyone working Phoenix." "Okay, great," John says. "I'll send the info to Wes later today, and I'll let you know what he and I decide to do." He signs off, and I consider the potential stroke of good fortune that someone could be working on the audit response. I then wonder if the fatigue is getting to me. Something is really screwy in the world when I'm finding reasons to thank development and security in the same day. Chapter 14. Tuesday, September 16th. By late Monday night, we had stabilized the situation. Working with Chris's team, the stores finally had working cash registers again, but everyone knows it's only a temporary fix. At least we don't need to keep sensitive cardholder data anymore, much to John's relief. It's 10:37 a.m., and I'm standing outside of Steve's office with Chris. He's leaning against the wall, looking pensively at the floor. Anne, John, and Kirsten are also here, waiting for their turn, like penitent students waiting outside the principal's office in elementary school. The door to Steve's office opens, and Sarah walks out. She looks ashen-faced and on the verge of tears. She was the first to go in, and her session didn't even take the whole 10 minutes. She closes the door behind her, blows out her breath, and says to Chris and me, "You're next." "Here goes nothing," I say, opening the door. Steve stands by the window, looking out over the corporate campus. "Take a seat, gentlemen." When we're sitting down, Steve starts to pace in front of us. "I've talked with Sarah. As the project leader, I'm holding her responsible for the success or failure of Phoenix. I have no idea if I have a leadership problem or if she just has the wrong people on the bus." My jaw drops. Did Sarah somehow manage to weasel her way out of her part in the disaster? This whole thing is her fault. Steve turns to Chris. "We put over $20 million into this project, and the lion's share went to your team. From where I'm standing, we'd be better off if we had nothing to show for it. Instead, I have half my company scrambling to pick up the wreckage from the damage you caused." Turning back to both of us, he continues, "In the good years, we were a 5% net margin company. That meant to make $1 million, we had to sell $20 million in products. Who knows how many sales we lost over the weekend and how many loyal customers we've lost forever." He starts pacing again. "We've done a terrible disservice to our customers. They're the people who need to fix their cars to go to work. Their fathers working on projects with their kids. We've also screwed some of our best suppliers and clients. To appease the people who actually used Phoenix, marketing is now giving away $100 vouchers, which could cost us millions of dollars. Come on! We're supposed to take money from customers, not the other way around." As a former sergeant, I know there's a time and place for dressing someone down, but this is too much. "No offense, sir, but this is supposed to be news to me. I called you, explaining what would happen, asking you to delay the launch. You not only blew me off, you told me to try to convince Sarah. Where's your responsibility in all of this? Or have you outsourced all your thinking to her?" As I'm talking, I realize I may be making a big mistake by saying what I really think. Maybe it's from weeks of crisis-fueled adrenaline, but it feels good rattling Steve's cage. Really good. Steve stops pacing, pointing his finger at my forehead. "I know more about responsibility than you may learn in your entire lifetime. I'm tired of your Chicken Little routine, screaming that the sky is falling and then happily saying, 'I told you so' afterward. I need you to come to me with some actual solutions." Leaning into him, I say, "I told you exactly what was going to happen when your sidekick Sarah brought up this crazy plan almost 2 weeks ago. I proposed to you a timeline that would have prevented all this from happening. You tell me that I could have done better? I'm all ears." With exaggerated respect, I add, "Sir?" "I'll tell you what I need from you," he replies calmly. "I need the business to tell me it's no longer being held hostage by you IT guys. This has been the running complaint the entire time I've been CEO. IT is in the way of every major initiative. Meanwhile, our competitors pull away from us, leaving us in the dust. Damn it, we can't even take a crap without IT being in the way." He takes a deep breath. "None of this is why you're here today. I called you in to tell you 2 things. First, thanks to this latest IT screw-up, the board has insisted that we investigate splitting up the company. They think the company is worth more sold off in pieces. I'm against this, but they've already got consultants in our panties investigating its feasibility. There's nothing I can do about that. Second, I'm done playing Russian roulette with IT. Phoenix just shows me that IT is a competency that we may not be able to develop here. Maybe it's not in our DNA. I've given Dick the green light to investigate outsourcing all of IT and asked him to select a vendor in 90 days. Outsourcing all of IT? Holy shit. That means everyone in my entire department may not have jobs anymore. That means that I may not have a job anymore. In a sudden and sobering instant, I realized that the feeling of elation and confidence I felt rattling Steve's cage was only an illusion. He has all the power. With a wave of his pen, he could outsource all of us to the lowest cost bidder from some random corner of the planet. I glance over at Chris, and he looks as shaken as I feel. Steve continues. I expect you'll give Dick all the help he requires. If you can pull off some sort of miracle during the next 90 days, we'll consider keeping IT in-house. Thank you, gentlemen. Please send in Kirsten, he says with finality. Sorry I'm late, I say, slumping down in the booth across from Chris. Shell-shocked after our meeting with Steve, he and I decided to meet for lunch. In front of him is some sort of fruity drink with an umbrella. I always figured him to be a blue-collar drinker, more like Pabst Blue Ribbon, not some bachelorette party mixed drink. He laughs humorously. Trust me, you showing up 10 minutes late is the least of my problems. Get yourself a drink. Paige tells me repeatedly that I shouldn't trust this guy. She has a great instinct for people, but when it comes to me, she's embarrassingly protective, which makes me laugh. I'm the ex-Marine, after all. She's just a nice nurse. Any Pilsner you have on tap, please, I say to the waitress. And a scotch and water, too. It's been a rough day. That's what I heard. No problem at all, sweetie, she replies, laughing. To Chris, she asks, Another Mai Tai for you? He nods, handing her his empty glass. So that's what a Mai Tai looks like. I've never tried one. We Marines are very self-conscious about what we're seen drinking. Chris raises his water glass and says, To having a common death sentence. I smile wanly and raise my glass. Feeling obligated to inject some optimism, I say, And here's to figuring out how we get a stay of execution from the governor. We clink glasses. You know, I've been thinking, Chris says. Maybe my group being outsourced wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I've been in software development for virtually my entire career. I'm used to everyone demanding miracles, expecting the impossible, people changing requirements at the last minute, but after living through this latest nightmare project, I wonder if it might be time for a change. I can't believe it. Chris has always been confident, even arrogant, seeming to really love doing what he does. What kind of change? You thinking about opening a Mai Tai bar in Florida or something like that? Chris shrugs. When he looks down, I can see the huge bags underneath his eyes and the fatigue in his face. I used to love this work, but it's gotten so much more difficult over the last 10 years. Technology keeps changing faster and faster, and it's nearly impossible to keep up anymore. The waitress comes back with our drinks. Part of me feels guilty about drinking during lunch on company time, but I figure I've earned it, having given enough of my personal time to the company over the last 2 weeks. Chris takes a long swig, and so do I. He continues, It's crazy what programmers and even managers like me have to learn every couple of years. Sometimes it's a totally new database technology, a new programming or project management method, or a new technology delivery model, like cloud computing. Just how many times can you throw out everything you know to keep up with the latest newfangled trend? I look in the mirror every once in a while, asking myself, will this be the year that I give up? Will I spend the rest of my career doing COBOL maintenance, or become just another has-been middle manager? I laugh sympathetically. I chose to be in the technology backwaters. I was happy there. That is, until Steve threw me back into the big shark-infested pool. Shaking his head, he continues, It's harder than ever to convince the business to do the right thing. They're like kids in a candy store. They read in an airline magazine that they can manage their whole supply chain in the cloud for $499 per year, and suddenly, that's the main company initiative. When we tell them it's not actually that easy, and show them what it takes to do it right, they disappear. Where did they go? They're talking to their cousin Vinny or some outsourcing sales guy who promises that they can do it in 1/10 of the time and cost. I laugh. A couple of years ago, someone in marketing asked my group to support a database reporting tool that one of their summer interns wrote. It was actually pretty brilliant. given that she only had a couple of months to work on it. And then it started being used in daily operations. How in the hell do you support and secure something that's written in Microsoft Access? When the auditors found out that we couldn't secure access to all the data, we spent weeks cobbling together something that satisfied them. It's like the free puppy, I continue. It's not the upfront capital that kills you. It's the operations and maintenance on the back end. Chris cracks up. Yes, exactly. They'll say, the puppy can't quite do everything we need. Can you train it to fly airplanes? It's just a simple matter of coding, right? After we order food, I tell him about how reluctant I was to accept my new role and my inability to get my arms around all the work that my group has committed to. Interesting, Chris says. You know, we're struggling too. We've never had so many problems hitting our ship dates. My engineers keep getting pulled off of feature development to handle escalations when things break, and deployments keep taking longer and longer. What used to take 10 minutes to deploy starts taking an hour, then a full day, then an entire weekend, then 4 days. I've even got some deployments that are now taking over a week to complete, like Phoenix. He continues. What use is it having all these offshore developers building features if we aren't getting to market any faster? We keep lengthening the deployment intervals so that we can get more features deployed in each batch. He laughs. I was in a meeting last week where the feature backlog was so long, the product managers were arguing about which features will get worked on 3 years from now. We can't even plan effectively for 1 year, let alone 3 years. What's the use? I listen intently. What's happening with Phoenix is a combination of the need to deliver needed features to market, forcing us to take shortcuts, which are causing ever-worsening deployments. He's put his finger on a very important downward spiral we need to break out of. Listen, Bill, I know it's a little late for this, but better late than never. I'm really sorry about my part in this Phoenix fiasco. Sarah came to me a week before Kirsten's project management meeting, asking me all sorts of questions. She asked when would be the soonest that we could be code complete. I had no idea she was going to interpret that as the go-live date, especially with Steve in the room. William predicted that it was going to be a disaster, and I should have listened to him too. That was a bad judgment on my part. I look into his eyes for a couple of moments. I finally decide to believe him. I nod and say, Thanks. Don't worry about it. I add, but don't do it again. If you do, I'll break both of your legs, and then I'll have Wes attend every one of your staff meetings. I'm not sure which is more motivating. Chris smiles, raising his glass. Here's to never letting this happen again, eh? A good thought. I smile and clink my glass against his. I finish my second beer. I'm really worried that Sarah is going to try to blame this whole thing on us, you know? Chris looks up from his glass and says, She's like Teflon. Nothing sticks to her. We've got to stick together. I've got your back, and I'll give you a heads up if I see her trying some weird political crap again. Likewise, I say emphatically. I look at my watch. It's 1:20 p.m. It's time to head back, so I signal our waitress for the check. This has been great. We need to do this more often. How about we meet once a week and figure out what we need to do to head off this boneheaded idea to outsource all of IT? Absolutely, he says. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to roll over on this. I'm going down swinging. With that, we shake hands. Even after eating some food, I feel buzzed. I wonder where I can find some breath mints so I won't smell like I spent the morning in a distillery. I look at my schedule on my phone and move all my meetings to later in the week. At 4 p.m., I'm still in my office when I get an email from Chris. From Chris Allers, to Bill Palmer. Date, September 16th, 4:07 p.m. Subject, throwing a little post-Phoenix party. Hey, Bill. It was good meeting for lunch. I had a great time. We're throwing a little impromptu party to celebrate the completion of Phoenix. It's nothing elaborate, but I've ordered a beer keg, some wine, and food, and we're congregating right now in the Building 7 lunchroom. We'd love to have your folks join us. In my mind, it was one of the best team efforts I've seen in this company. I ordered enough booze for everyone on your team, too. See you there, Chris. I genuinely appreciate Chris's gesture, and I think my team will, too. Especially Wes. I forward the email to Wes and Patty, telling them to encourage everyone to make an appearance. They deserve it. A couple of moments later, my phone vibrates. I look down and read a reply from Wes. From Wes Davis to Bill Palmer, Patty McKee. Date September 16th, 4:09 p.m. Subject, forward, throwing a little post-Phoenix party. What a jackass. Most of my guys won't be able to make it. We're still busy fixing all the bad transaction data that their shitty code generated. Must be nice to have the luxury of celebrating. Mission accomplished and all that, right? W. I groan. Although the crisis might be over for Chris's guys on the upper floors, the people like us in the basement are still bailing water. Still, I think it's important that we get our guys to drop by the party. In order to succeed, we need to create these relationships with Chris's team, even if it's only for a half hour. I grit my teeth and call Wes. As Spock once said, only Nixon could go to China, and I guess I'm Nixon. Chapter 15. Wednesday, September 17th. Even though I can't take the entire day off, I take Paige out for breakfast. She's been holding things down on the home front single-handedly, while I have spent every waking hour at work. We're at Mother's, one of our favorite breakfast restaurants. We were here on their big opening day almost 8 years ago. The owner has since hit the big time. Not only has her restaurant become a local favorite, but she's written a cookbook, and we saw her all over TV during her book tour. We are so happy to see her success, and I know Paige loves it when the owner recognizes us, even when it's crowded. I look in Paige's eyes as she sits across from me at the table. The restaurant is surprisingly crowded on a Wednesday morning. People having business meetings and local hipsters doing, well, whatever local hipsters do in the morning. Working? Playing? I genuinely have no idea. She says, holding the mimosa in her hands, "Thanks for taking some time off. Are you sure you can't spend the rest of the day with me?" At first, I almost didn't order one for myself because I didn't want to have anything alcoholic on a work day. But for the second day in a row, I find myself saying, screw it. Drinking my orange juice and champagne, I smile sadly, shaking my head. I really wish I could, honey. If we were in development, I'd give the entire team the day off like Chris did. But in operations, we're still finishing cleaning up from the Phoenix fiasco. I have no idea when life will be normal again. She shakes her head slowly. I can't believe that this is only your 3rd week. You've changed. I'm not complaining, but I haven't seen you this stressed out since. She looks up for a moment, reviewing her memories. She looks back at me and says, Ever. Half the time we're driving in the car, you have this distant look on your face. The rest of the time you're clenching your jaw, like you're reenacting some terrible meeting in your head. You never hear what I'm saying, because you're so preoccupied by work. I start to apologize, but she cuts me off. I'm not complaining. I don't want to wreck this nice moment while we're enjoying some time away from work and the kids. But when I think about how happy you were before you accepted this role, I wonder why you're doing it. I purse my lips together. Even with all the trauma in the past couple of weeks, I feel like the organization has been better off as a result of my contribution. And even with the imminent threat of being outsourced, I'm glad that I'm one of the people trying to fend them off. And yet, for over 5 years, I was one of the very few people able to maintain any amount of work-life balance. And now that balance is completely gone. A fellow NCO in the Marines once told me that his priorities were the following: provider, parent, spouse, and change agent. In that order. I think about that. First and foremost, my most important responsibility is to be the provider for my family. My pay raise will help us get our debt paid down, and we can start saving money again for our children's college education like we always wanted to. It'd be difficult to give that up and go back to feeling like we're just treading water. We tried to sell it a couple of years ago, so we could move across town to be closer to her parents, but after 9 months, we took it off the market. With my promotion, we can pay off our second mortgage sooner, and maybe, just maybe, if things go well, in a few years, Paige might be able to stop working. But is it worth having to deal with Steve's raving demands for the impossible, day in and day out? Even worse, having to deal with that nutcase, Sarah. "See, you're doing it again. Let me guess," Paige says, interrupting my thoughts. "You're thinking about some meeting that you've had with Steve, and how he's turned into a total asshole that no one can reason with, except for that nutcase Sarah." I laugh. "How did you know?" She smiles. "It's so easy. You start looking off somewhere, and then your shoulders and jaw tense up, and your lips press together." I laugh again. Paige's expression turns sad. "I keep wishing that they picked someone else for this job. Steve knew exactly how to get you to say yes. He just made it sound like it was your duty to save his job and the company." I nod slowly. "But honey, now it's really true. If they outsource all of IT, almost 200 people in my group could be out of a job or working for some faceless outsourcing firm. And another 200 people in Chris's organization. I really feel like I can keep that from happening." She looks dubious, saying, "You really think you and Chris can stop them? Based on what you said, it sure sounds like they've already made up their mind." After I drop off a subdued Paige at home, I take a moment in the driveway to look at my phone before driving into work. I'm surprised when I see an upbeat email from Wes. From Wes Davis, to Bill Palmer, Patty McKee. Date, September 19th, 9:45 a.m. Subject, forward, "Woo, a change management close call. Check this out, guys. One of the DBAs sent this out to all the other engineers this morning." Begin forwarded message. "Guys, the new change process saved our bacon this morning. Today we had 2 groups simultaneously making changes to the materials management database and application servers. Neither group knew about the other. Rajiv spotted the potential collision on the change wall. We decided that my changes would go in first, and I'd call him when we were done. We could have totally made a mess of things. Keep those change cards coming, guys. It saved our butts today. Thanks to Rajiv, Tom, Shelley, and Brent. Robert." At last, some good news. One of the problems of prevention is that you rarely know about the disasters you averted. But here we did. Nice. And even better yet, it came from one of the engineers, not a manager. When I get to my desk, I see the post-it note on my docking station and smile. I carefully power on my laptop, wait patiently for 2 minutes for the login screen to come up before plugging it into the docking station. No screaming alarm. Exactly as documented. Nice. Someone knocks on my door. It's Patty. "I'm glad I caught you. Do you have a minute? I think we have another problem." "Sure," I say. "What's on your mind? Let me guess. More people complaining about change management?" Patty shakes her head, looking grim. "A little more serious than that. Let's go to the change coordination room." I groan. Every time Patty summons me there, it's because of some new intractable problem. But problems, like dog poop left in the rain, rarely get better just by ignoring them. I stand up and say, "Lead on." When we get to the conference room, I look at the change board. Something looks very different. "Uh-oh," I say. Patty looks at the board with me and says, "Uh-huh. Obvious, and yet, still kind of unexpected, right?" I can only grunt in response. On the board, up until last Thursday, it's pretty much as I remember it. On each day, there are somewhere between 40 and 50 changes, each marked completed. But on the days following, There are barely any changes posted at all. It's like someone just wiped all the cards clean off the board. Where did they go? She points at another board on the side of the room that she's labeled, "Changes to be rescheduled." There's a basket underneath, overflowing with piles and piles of index cards. Presumably 600 of them. Understanding starting to dawn on me, I ask, "And the reason none of the changes got completed is?" Patty rolls her eyes. "Phoenix happened, that's what. All scheduled work went out the window. We mobilized almost everyone who could type to help, and only now are they being released back to their normal duties. You can see on the board that today's the first day that scheduled changes are starting to happen as planned again. And this seems important for some reason." And then it hits me. I had called Eric briefly to tell him that I had discovered 3 of the 4 categories of work: business projects, internal projects, and changes. He merely said that there was one more type of work, maybe the most important type, because it's so destructive. And in a searing moment of insight, I think I know what the 4th category of work is. And then suddenly, I don't. My tenuous understanding flickers briefly, and then goes out entirely. I say, "Damn!" Patty looks at me questioningly, but I ignore her while I try to recapture that fleeting moment of clarity. I look at the portion of the change board with no cards on it. It really is like some giant hand swept all those change cards aside that we had so meticulously scheduled and arranged on the board. And we know what swept it aside. It was Phoenix blowing up. But Phoenix isn't the 4th category of work. Maybe what I'm looking for is like dark matter. You can only see it by what it displaces or how it interacts with other matter that we can see. Patty called it firefighting. That's work too, I suppose. It certainly kept everyone up at all hours of the night, and it displaced all the planned changes. I turn back to Patty and say slowly, "Let me guess. Brent didn't get any of his non-Phoenix change work completed either, right?" "Of course not. You were there, right?" she says, looking at me like I had grown 8 heads. "Brent was working around the clock on the recovery efforts, building all the new tooling to keep all the systems and data up. Everything else was put on the back burner. All the firefighting displaced all the planned work, both projects and changes." Ah, now I see it. What can displace planned work? Unplanned work. Of course. I laugh uproariously, which earns me a look of genuine concern from Patty, who even takes a step back from me. That's why Eric called it the most destructive type of work. It's not really work at all, like the others. The others are what you planned on doing, allegedly because you needed to do it. Unplanned work is what prevents you from doing it. Like matter and antimatter, in the presence of unplanned work, all planned work ignites with incandescent fury, incinerating everything around it. Like Phoenix. So much of what I've been trying to do during my short tenure as VP of IT operations is to prevent unplanned work from happening, coordinating changes better so they don't fail, ensuring the orderly handling of incidents and outages to prevent interrupting key resources, doing whatever it takes so that Brent won't be escalated to. I've been doing it mostly by instinct. I knew it was what had to be done because people were working on the wrong things. I tried to take all necessary steps to keep people from doing wrong work, or rather, unplanned work. I say, cackling and pumping my arms as if I had just scored a game-winning 60-yard field goal. Yes, I see it now. It really is unplanned work. The 4th category of work is unplanned work. My ebullient mood is tempered when I look at Patty, who looks puzzled and genuinely concerned. "I promise to explain later," I say. "Just what is it that you wanted me to see on the change board?" She's taken aback, but points again at the void of completed changes for the past week. "I know you were concerned about when 60% of the changes weren't getting completed, so I thought you'd really flip your lid when 100% of the changes didn't complete. Right?" "Yep. This is great work, Patty. Keep it up," I say agreeably. And then I turn around and head out the door, reaching for my cell phone. There's someone I need to call. "Hey!" Patty calls out. "Aren't you going to fill me in?" I yell over my shoulder. "Later, I promise." Back at my desk, I search everywhere for that slip of paper that Eric gave me. I'm pretty sure that I didn't throw it away, but I honestly didn't think that I would ever use it. I hear Ellen say from behind me, "Need help with anything?" And soon both of us are scrounging all over my desk to find that little piece of paper. "Is this it?" she asks, holding up something that she retrieved from my inbox. I look more closely, and yes, it's the crumpled 2-inch strip of paper that Eric gave me. It looks like a gum wrapper. Taking the piece of paper from her and holding it up, I say, "Great! Thank you so much for finding this. Believe it or not, this may be the most important piece of paper I've gotten in years." I decide to sit outside while I talk. In the bright autumn sunlight, I find a spot on a bench near the parking lot. As I sit down, there's not a cloud in the sky. I call Eric, who answers on the first ring. "Hey, Bill. How are you guys doing after Phoenix crashed and burned so spectacularly?" "Yeah, well, things are improving," I say. "You must have heard that our POS systems went down, and we also had a small credit card number breach." "Ha! Small credit card breach. I like that. Like small nuclear reactor meltdown. I've got to write that one down," he says, snorting. He's chuckling as though he predicted this level of calamity would occur, which, come to think of it, I suppose he did, in the conference room when I first met him. Something about clearing the calendar. Just like clearing the change board, I realize. I kick myself for not picking up on his clue sooner. "I trust you can tell me now what the 4 categories of work are," I hear him ask. "Yes, I think I can," I say. "At the plant, I gave you one category, which was business projects like Phoenix," I say. Later, I realized that I didn't mention internal IT projects. A week after that, I realized that changes are another category of work. But it was only after the Phoenix fiasco that I saw the last one, because of how it prevented all other work from getting completed, and that's the last category, isn't it? Firefighting. Unplanned work. "Precisely," I hear Eric say. "You even used the term I like most for it, unplanned work. Firefighting is vividly descriptive, but unplanned work is even better. It might even be better to call it anti-work, since it further highlights its destructive and avoidable nature. Unlike the other categories of work, unplanned work is recovery work, which almost always takes you away from your goals. That's why it's so important to know where your unplanned work is coming from." I smile as he acknowledges my correct answer, and am oddly pleased that he validated my antimatter notion of unplanned work as well. He says, "What is this change board that you mentioned?" I tell him about my attempts to get some sort of change process going, and my attempt to elevate the discussion above how many fields there were on the change form, which then resulted in getting people to put their intended changes on index cards, and our need to juggle them on the board. "Very good," he says. "You've put together tools to help with the visual management of work and pulling work through the system. This is a critical part of the first way, which is creating fast flow of work through development and IT operations. Index cards on a Kanban board is one of the best mechanisms to do this, because everyone can see WIP. Now you must continually eradicate your largest sources of unplanned work, per the second way." Until now, having been so wrapped up in defining what work is, I had forgotten about Eric and his 3 ways. I dismissed them before, but now I'm listening closely to his every word. And over the next 45 minutes, I find myself telling him the entire tale of my short tenure. I'm interrupted only by Eric's loud laughs and guffaws as I describe the calamities and my attempts to curb the chaos. When I'm finished, he says, "You've come much further than I thought. You've started to take steps to stabilize the operational environment. You've started to visually manage WIP within IT operations, and you've started to protect your constraint, Brent. You've also reinforced a culture of operational rigor and discipline. Well done, Bill." I furrow my brows and say, "Wait, Brent is my constraint? What do you mean?" He replies, Well, if we're going to talk about your next steps, you definitely need to know about constraints because you need to increase flow. Right now, nothing is more important." Eric assumes a lecturing voice as he starts. "You say you learned about plant operations management when you were in business school. I hope, as part of your curriculum, you read The Goal by Dr. Eli Goldratt. If you don't have a copy anymore, get another one. You're going to need it." I think my copy of that book is in my office at home. As I jot a quick reminder to look for it, he continues, "Goldratt taught us that in most plants, there are a very small number of resources, whether it's men, machines, or materials, that dictates the output of the entire system. We call this the constraint, or bottleneck. Either term works. Whatever you call it, until you create a trusted system to manage the flow of work to the constraint is constantly wasted, which means that the constraint is likely being drastically underutilized. That means you're not delivering to the business the full capacity available to you. It also likely means that you're not paying down technical debt, so your problems and amount of unplanned work continues to increase over time," he says. He continues, "You've identified this Brent person as a constraint to restore service. Trust me, you'll find that he constrains many other important flows of work as well." I try to interrupt to ask a question, but he continues headlong. "There are 5 focusing steps which Goldratt describes in The Goal. Step 1 is to identify the constraint. You've done that, so congratulations. Keep challenging yourself to really make sure that's your organizational constraint, because if you're wrong, nothing you do will matter. Remember, any improvement not made at the constraint is just an illusion, yes? Step 2 is to exploit the constraint," he continues. "In other words, make sure that the constraint is not allowed to waste any time, ever. It should never be waiting on any other resource for anything, and it should always be working on the highest priority commitment the IT operations organization has made to the rest of the enterprise. Always." I hear him say encouragingly, "You've done a good job exploiting the constraint on several fronts. You've reduced reliance on Brent for unplanned work and outages. You've even started to figure out how to exploit Brent better for the 3 other types of work, business and IT projects and changes. Remember, unplanned work kills your ability to do planned work, so you must always do whatever it takes to eradicate it. Murphy does exist, so you'll always have unplanned work, but it must be handled efficiently. You've still got a long way to go." In a more stern voice, he says, "But you're ready to start thinking about step 3, which is to subordinate the constraint. In the theory of constraints, this is typically implemented by something called drum buffer rope. In The Goal, the main character, Alex, learns about this when he discovers that Herbie, the slowest Boy Scout in the troop, actually dictates the entire group's marching pace. Alex moved Herbie to the front of the line to prevent kids from going on too far ahead. Later at Alex's plant, he started to release all work in accordance to the rate it could be consumed by the heat treat ovens, which was his plant's bottleneck. That was his real-life Herbie. Fully 2 decades after The Goal was published," he continues, "David J. Anderson developed techniques of using a Kanban board to release work and control WIP for development and IT operations. You may find that of interest. You and Penelope are close with your change board to a Kanban board that can manage flow. So here's your homework," he says. "Figure out how to set the tempo of work according to Brent. Once you make the appropriate mapping of IT operations to work on the plant floor, it will be obvious. Call me when you've figured it out." Wait, I say hurriedly before he hangs up. "I'll do the homework, but aren't we missing the entire point here? What caused all the unplanned work is Phoenix. Why are we focusing on Brent right now? Don't we need to address all the issues with Phoenix inside of development, where all the unplanned work actually came from?" "Now you sound just like Jimmy, complaining about things you can't control," he sighs. "Of course Phoenix is causing all the problems. You get what you design for. Chester, your peer in development, is spending all his cycles on features instead of stability, security, scalability, manageability, operability, continuity, and all those other beautiful itties. On the other end of the assembly line, Jimmy keeps trying to retrofit production controls after the toothpaste is out of the tube, he says, scoffing. Hopeless! Futile! It'll never work. You need to design these things, what some call non-functional requirements, into the product. But your problem is that the person who knows the most about where your technical debt is and how to actually build code that is designed for operations is too busy. You know who that person is, don't you? I groan. Brent. Yep, he says. Without solving your Brent problem, you'll just be inviting him to design and architecture meetings with development, but he'll never show up because... Being prompted again, I respond, unplanned work. Good, he says. You're getting better at this. But before you get a big head, I'll tell you that there's still a big piece of the first way that you're missing. Jimmy's problem with the auditors shows that he can't distinguish what work matters to the business versus what doesn't. And incidentally, you have the same problem too. Remember, it goes beyond reducing WIP. Being able to take needless work out of the system is more important than being able to put more work into the system. To do that, you need to know what matters to the achievement of the business objectives, whether it's projects, operations, strategy, compliance with laws and regulations, security, or whatever. He continues, remember, outcomes are what matter, not the process, not controls, or, for that matter, what work you complete. I sigh. Just when I think I have a concrete enough understanding of constraints, once again Eric becomes elusive. Don't get distracted. Call me when you know how to throttle release of work to Brent, he says and hangs up. I can't believe it. I try calling him back twice, but it rolls immediately to his voicemail. Sitting down on the bench, I lean back, take a deep breath, and force myself to enjoy the warm morning. I hear birds chirping and the noise of traffic from the road. Then, for the next 10 minutes, I capture as much as I can remember on my clipboard, trying to piece together what Eric covered. When I'm done, I head inside to call Wes and Patty. I know exactly what I need to do and am excited to get started.